I played an Autumn Seasonal, what is likely to be the last big Scarlet and Violet Draft League tournament on Smogon before Champions comes out, and I placed 55th out of over 500 people. Not really a great result from my perspective, but a run that I want to talk through. I've recorded up pretty much all of the battles as I went week by week, and I thought it'd be interesting to show you just a huge long movie of the team that I drafted, the games that I played, because I had a lot of really good games in here that I think would be a shame if they didn't get showed off. Even though the result maybe not what we would want at 6-3. If you guys are excited for today's video, make sure to like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers before Pokemon Champions, so any subscription helps a ton towards hitting that goal. So as I said, I went 6-3 in this tournament. You had to go 8-2 to make top cuts, so a little bit missing the mark on that, and I think a lot of the games that you'll see here, there are definitely some opportunities to win. I really liked my team. This is my second chance again to use Iron Valiant, and I think I made a much better account of myself this time than I did the last time I used Iron Valiant. You guys didn't see that on the channel, unfortunately. I guess fortunately, unfortunately, whatever you want to think about. So the structure of this video, as you can tell by the length, is super long. I've got a little bit of a draft analysis coming in this video, and then I basically went through the matchup, team builder, and battle for basically every match that I played in this tournament. So similar to some of the videos you've seen from the Frost Battle League and the JJDL in the past, where we've had kind of 3 replay videos. Similar video this time, except we have the whole tournament. I hope you guys enjoy this. I know people like to watch the very long Showdown Draft League content videos. I'm going to hopefully do that a lot more next year. I have a lot more tournaments that I plan on playing in, not just Wi-Fi leagues. So hopefully you guys are super excited for that, because next year is going to be a big year for tournaments in my Draft League playing career. So that's all I have for this. Let's get right into the video. So let's get into the team then that we drafted for the final, I think, draft tournament for Scarlet and Violet for its kind of lifespan before we get into Champions. I had the first overall pick in this tour. This is an 8-mon tour, so you'll see a little bit more of a powerful team than you're used to if you watch a lot of Wi-Fi content. We start with Iron Valiant. This is the best Pokemon in SV. There's kind of been no real debate on this topic for much of the format outside of like times we've allowed like broken things like Dragapult and such. Obviously, like those can be more broken. That's obviously not super controversial, but Iron Valiant is one of the best kind of attackers that we've kind of ever had access to in Pokemon Draft League. 130 attack, 120 special attack, and 116 speed with booster energy as an item slot is so overwhelming at times in the builder. The fairy fighting coverage is very good, having close combat to just break through steel types that would generally resist fairy. There's a reason that this Pokemon is drafted first overall in basically every pool. It is just one of the best things that has, in terms of Pokemon power, that has happened in this format. And that's not even to say that it doesn't have a lot of utility. This is kind of one of the other things that's really happened with this format is Encore has become such a prevalent part of this format that it shows up on this Pokemon is very useful in this Pokemon at 116 speed. Like this Pokemon I feel like is kind of emblematic of everything that happened with Pokemon Draft League in Scarlet and Violet. And as my first overall pick, you just can't go wrong with it. It's just such a good Pokemon. I used it once before in kind of a personal league that I ran, helping some other friends get content done, and I didn't do too well with it. But this tournament, I really do feel like I have a team and a kind of a process that'll enable me to win a lot of games and hopefully put up a good result. The next pick in round 2 on the back wheel, we start with Roaring Moon and then we go to Gliscor. We'll start with Roaring Moon. I used this Pokemon in one last ride, kind of the last ride Wi-Fi tour. Obviously there is the Draft Jam, which you've been watching on the channel. Hopefully you've been enjoying that and kind of the fresh perspective we're doing there. But Roaring Moon here was kind of the speed option that was kind of left to me, and it has really kind of shot up the ranks. It was drafted a lot more in Autumn Seasonal, I think by like a measure of like 30%. I think it's drafted on 93% of possible drafts this time around, which is definitely a lot different than kind of the perspective on this Pokemon even like 6-7 months ago. This Pokemon was really shot up as one of those kind of top tier speed options. While it is a little bit behind at 119, compared to like the Greninjas, the Darkrai's, and the Meowscaradas of the world, it has a lot more power behind it with the 139 attack. That is kind of where the key to this comes in. Your knockoffs, your Dragon Claws are doing so much more, and you have access to photosynthesis to create really powerful Dragon Dance sequences and setups that are just really tough for a lot of people to deal with. The typing is a little awkward at times that I find in the builder. And I think my team in One Last Ride didn't really utilize it that well. And I think part of that is I went Terra in Amorous and kind of had a really top-heavy-ish team. I didn't like that team for a variety of reasons. But I think this team is going to be really, really good for it. Knockoffs pressure is going to be really nice to help with potential hazard stack. I don't have a lot of those elements that are possible every week. But just like as an offensive complement to Iron Valiant is going to be very, very nice. As kind of like an additional Scarfer to have access to. The Dragon Dance sets are going to be super powerful. And hell, Choice Band is going to be really, really good a lot of situations too. So as a kind of fast attacker, this Pokemon has kind of everything we need, with Iron Valiant providing a little bit more utility on the speed side. And as I said, Gliscor is the next Pokemon. We got to put Poison Heal up as the ability. That's the ability that matters for this Pokemon. And this is also my first of 2 Terra Captains. Terra Gliscor has been a Pokemon that has shot up kind of the usage rankings a lot recently and for this tour. A lot more people are using it because it's a great way to use Swords Dance and Agility with kind of a Terra Blast and Earthquake to really put a lot of pressure on teams. And Terra Gliscor has obviously been a Pokemon that has been, terrorized the OU metagame for a while. It's got a lot going on for it because of that, but like the Terra does enable setup sets a lot more frequently than you would be able to otherwise. As someone who's played Draft League and Pokemon for a long time, I'm probably going to end up biased to using a lot of defensive Gliscor sets. That's really usually how I contextualize and use it. And that's how I feel like its role is going to have to be on this team a lot of the time. If you watch me play before, you know that I like to play. I love balanced Pokemon, and I know that SV hasn't been about balance for a lot of the life cycle of this generation. But I feel like the metagame's finally getting to a point where balance like really works out well. And while Gliscor, I do want to make sure I'm not doing a disservice by just only using it as like a defensive pivot to get up Stealth Rocks. Spoiler, it is my only Stealth Rocker, which is a little bit concerning. We'll get into that near the end. But I wanted to do a little bit more than just that in this team, because I think it's got so much more to provide. Now, that being said, we got a really, really good second Terra Captain, an Iron Crown. This Pokemon is awesome. This is another one I feel like I want to make sure that when I get into the battles, I'm using it to the best of my abilities and kind of creating a wide variety of sets. I love kind of like Assault Vest pivots, and this as a Steel type does a really great job of doing that with it has Volt Switch access, for example. But, another booster energy Pokemon. That's 3 out of 4 on this team. That kind of really shows the Scarlet and Violet impact on this metagame. Booster energy as a concept, really, really powerful. Puts a lot of pressure in prep. So Booster Energy, Calm Mind, a very, very popular set to use with something like the Iron Crown here. And something that I'm going to try to leverage. And the Terra option, Steel Psychic is a really, really good typing. Though it's going to be weak to like very specific things a lot of the time. And the Terra option does allow me to go into more neutral typings, which will be nice. And does give me access, you'll see in some of the rounds to come, to coverage that I wouldn't have access to, which could realistically be very, very game-breaking in a lot of matchups. So I'm really looking forward to using this Pokemon. I expect I'm most likely going to Terra this Pokemon more often than not. Though one of the things I look at with these 2 Terra Captains is there's a good chance my Terra is going to be very defensive most weeks in terms of its application. So not going to be using Terra in kind of the same way you see a lot of Raging Bolt and Zarude teams use Terra very offensively. This might be a more defensive kind of setup in terms of Terra, though both of these Pokemon can win games offensively with Terra in the right circumstances. I took Tentacruel with the Iron Crown on the wheel, mainly because I want to have access to a spinner. That's not really something I've prioritized a lot in this format, is having access to Rapid Spin. And a lot of my opinions on that in Scarlet and Violet has come from mainly 16-player draft, 16-player draft. Yeah, I got it right the first time. In 16-player draft, if you're not getting one of the premier spinners, I feel like you're oftentimes doing yourself a disservice by putting them onto your builds every week. The main one that I like to call out is Hitmontop. I feel like Pokemon like Hitmontop, is the value of removing hazards worth it to have that Pokemon on your team? And are you better off just running boots on things and being very intentional with what Pokemon you want to use your choice Scarfers, etc. In this team, I don't really have a team that's particularly weak to hazards, but I think Tentacruel provides other things as well. It's a pretty good water type. There's a lot of stuff like Iron Moth, which is really shooting up in popularity, that this Pokemon is good against. This Pokemon is generally good against, to a certain degree, Tentacruel, or not Tentacruel, to Tornadus Therian as well. Not to say that I don't have good counterplay with Iron Crown, but like this does a decent job of walling like some of the key special attackers in the metagame, or at least holding them back, while also being a rapid spinner. This team can be weak to spikes if it wants to be, mainly the idea that like if I want to run Life Orb Iron Valiant, spikes does make that Pokemon much more difficult to use a lot of the time. So having access to a rapid spinner, which also covers off a lot of the special attackers that we'll see in this metagame, is really, really crucial and a really good addition to the team. And one that I think will provide a lot of value over the course of this tournament. There's not much to say other than that about this Pokemon, though. It does have knockoff, which will help a little bit, kind of pressuring some of these threats, but you'll see kind of the matchups as this tournament goes on, that this Pokemon is very good at thriving in very specific situations, and then also gives me Rapid Spin. My final wheel picks, I go with Ogerpon, and I forget what the price of Ogerpon was in this tour, but it was like 9 or 8 or something. It was very, very cheap. And I use this Pokemon to, I would say, pretty good success in the JJDL Civil War tournament. You would have seen that in the channel over a year ago. Obviously, that was a very much lower powered format compared to what we're playing in now. But there's a few things I really like about this Pokemon. One, I really like a 110 speed tier. I don't really have that like 120 plus speed tier on this team, which would be very, very good. But 110, 116, and 119 is still pretty good in terms of the Roaring Moon to Iron Valiant to Ogerpon. And that gives me access to a lot of utility that's really important. One, Encore. As I said, Encore is really, really powerful in this generation. It's powerful in all generations, but the access to Encore is so much more prevalent in Scarlet and Violet, and kind of is one of like the key hallmarks to every team is having access to Encore. Also has access to Knockoff, which I have kind of been on the record for saying multiple times. I think that's one of the best moves, and probably a broken move if we consider that. I don't know if I would consider it bannable per se, but I think a lot of people, I think people like give Scald a lot of hate, where I think Knockoff deserves just a little bit more. But this Pokemon with the 110 speed tier, it also has a really good attack stat with 120. It can do a lot of things, interesting defensively with its typing. And it has a lot of utility offensively. Ivy Cudgel's a tough move to switch into. Knockoff is a really good move to pressure Pokemon that would switch in. Encore as well, as I said, very good against a lot of the setup we see. And then Leech Seed, Synth. Like, there's a lot of things that this Pokemon can do that for like 9 or 8 points is really, really good value and is great in that 110 speed tier. The Ogerpons are like great leads as well. This gives me a Spiker, which is really important. As I said, my only hazard setter up to this point was Gliscor with the Stealth Rocks, and if I want to run setup Gliscor sets, I'm going to need access to another hazard setter. Preferably I would have one more, but we only have 2 on this team, and I'm kind of, I've moved back and forth, but I think generally I'm of the perspective that Spikes are probably better than Stealth Rocks in most cases in this format, mainly due to a lot of the fighting types, and the fighting types are pretty good against my team, I will say that. So that's something to definitely look out for in this tour. But Spikes, I really like having access to it here. And I think this Pokemon, while obviously there's a reason it's now down to 8 or 9 points without the Terra, I think this is going to be a really good utility Pokemon to have on this team and really round out a lot of builds with either Encore, Knockoff, Ivy Cudgel, Spikes, Spam. Counter is something that we've seen Jason Dietite use in his battles. I feel like I bring him up every time I do a draft analysis. I promise I don't want to glaze him more than he deserves. But this is like an ultimate 110 speed utility Pokemon. And then I got, with the 7th round pick on that wheel, was Rotom, which like it was crazy that it has stayed here this far. This is like one of the premier spin blockers in Scarlet and Violet Draft League right now, and probably always will be. This is kind of like the ultimate Great Tusk, at least initial answer. You'll see that a lot in this tournament. We play a lot of Great Tusk in these games. But overall, like, this is one of the best spin blockers we have access to. And like with a team that has very few hazard setters and wants those hazard setters to not be forced to hazard set all of the time and like be forced in that role, having a spin blocker is going to be very, very important. And just like it's like a fast like electric type is going to be very nice as well to break bulky waters. Ghost coverage is really, really good in this metagame as well. It's going to be super fire to have this Pokemon on the team. As I said, primarily as a spin blocker, but has a lot of roles offensively as well. And that leaves me with my 8th round pick. I spent a lot of points up to this point, so we're not going to get much more than a Granbull here. I really like Granbull for a few reasons. One, my fairy is offensive, and having a defensive fairy is going to help in like very specific matchups against very specific Pokemon. Samurott Hisui and Garchomp are two that you'll see this come up against, at least in the battles that I played as of the point of recording this. There's a lot of matchups that it helps where Iron Valiant as a fairy type doesn't really help defensively that much. Obviously, you can use it to get really aggressive on stuff like Scale Shot, but you know, there are definitely so many times that you can switch in Iron Valiant on Garchomp and get away with it. Your opponent is going to Earthquake you if you do it one too many times, or even if you do it once, they're probably going to Earthquake you forever after that. So I think having access to a defensive fairy for like 3 points is very good value. There's really not much in this tier for me anyway, so I'm happy to end up with Granbull, a Pokemon that I actually think I'll be able to bring at least once or twice. I brought it twice so far, spoilers, as you get into those battles. So for 3 points, it's already going to provide as much value as I think I need it to justify that price point, considering how often it's come already. So as the Autumn Seasonal draft, let's get right into the battles. So for round 1 of Autumn Seasonal, we are paired with Avocado24, who just played in DCL a couple of months back at the point the video comes out. So definitely a very, very tough opponent to pull in round number 1. The team that they have is Tornadus Therian Terra, Iron Treads, Dragonite, Iron Moth, Rotom, Chestnut Terra, Carbink Terra, and Samurott Hisui. In terms of Tornadus Therian teams, I was kind of saying in the draft portion, I was really worried about the Tornti, Tinglu, Pecharunt teams, and mainly because I think my team struggles to break down Tinglu if it's paired alongside Pokemon like Tornadus Therian and Pecharunt, which can really stop my ability to actually break down a Pokemon like Tinglu. This matchup is a little bit easier in terms of Tornadus Therian matchups. Now, it still outspeeds my entire team, but the Pokemon that I have that can switch in and kind of handle these Torn sets, Tentacruel, Iron Crown, and Gliscor would be the 3 ones that can kind of hold back Tornadus Therian in most aspects. There's not as much in the way of like preventing these Pokemon from dealing with it. The main one is Iron Treads for the Iron Crown. We are very prepared in this matchup to make an aggressive play early on that Pokemon, but otherwise, without like the Pecharunt and the Tinglu as like defensive pieces to combine, it's a lot less threatening in this matchup, especially with the Ghost type being Rotom. Definitely much less potent on kind of either like on the defensive or even offensive side of the game compared to something like Pecharunt. The other thing to note here is the Iron Moth is not Terra as well, which means Tentacruel is going to completely lock that Pokemon down. So that's really good news to see there. The other 2 Terra captains, Chestnut could Terra in this battle. It's obviously expecting to see Torn Terra basically every time it comes. But Chestnut Terra, Poison is specifically useful in this matchup against something like Iron Valiant, giving them an extra Iron Valiant check. Whether I think they do that or not, it's kind of who knows at this point. But I think it's very likely that Torn just gets Terran into something like, I don't know, Fairy maybe. I think it's the most obvious going into the matchup on the face. When thinking about the rest of this matchup, the main thing that I think about here that's going to be a problem is Samurott Hisui. This is a Pokemon that's kind of fallen off. You see here, our opponent's taking it in round 8. And my team deceptively actually struggles to switch into it. Ogerpon, in theory, can every like once or twice, but not very consistently. And even if it does, Ogerpon gives so many free turns to Tornadus Therian that we don't actually want. Now, we're going to have to bring Granbull to hold back the Samurott Hisui, which does give those free Torn turns still, but Granbull is a much more consistent way to actually hold back the Samurott in the early game, because getting up spikes is going to be super, super important in this battle for my opponent to have, I wouldn't say any chance of winning, but to have a good chance of winning. Because I think realistically, the matchup is in my favor, outside of the fact that Torn as a setup threat can be very problematic. But otherwise, I think my team can very, very handle the kind of the defensive core that they have with an aggressive play in prep. And then Pokemon like Dragonite, Iron Moth, and Tornadus Therian, good offensively, but Iron Moth held kind of in check by Tentacruel. And Dragonite, we have decent prep for with our Scarfers. With that out of the way, let's get into the team builder. We have Choice Scarf, Iron Valiant with Destiny Bond, Close Combat, Moonblast, and Psycho Cut. As I said, Scarfers are going to be pretty important to help check my opponent's team offensively, mainly because they have stuff like Dragonite, which can be used as a Dragon Dance sweeper potentially in this battle. I think a little bit unlikely. I think CB Extreme Speed is going to be the more useful set here. But this also allows me to have a way to check the Tornado Starion. I kind of expect, in the sense that Tornado Starion is going to be used very defensively in this battle, whether as a sort of Assault Vest user, probably the most likely. It could be Boots defensive taunt knockoff as well. But I think likely its use is going to be very, very defensive in this battle. And if I can, one, remove the item with a knockoff or get up rocks early to pressure it, Choice Scarf Moonblast is a very, very difficult move for my opponent to switch into. The only real thing they have to switch into with is Iron Treads. And obviously we know Iron Treads is not a Pokemon you want to be switching into Iron Valiant that often. But as I said, our game plan does have a way to get that Iron Treads at least out of the way, hopefully very early. Psycho Cut here is just a final coverage move. It covers the poison on the Chestnut, which is a kind of a terror we half expect to maybe come in this battle. We'll see when we get into it, but it was one that we tested against and one that we want to be prepared for. And then Choice Scarf Destiny Wand is just a good way to catch out various Pokemon like the Tornadus if we have to come in and check it. We can throw up a Destiny Wand and just knock that Pokemon out right. The next Choice Scarfer is Roaring Moon. We don't really need anything outside of the Dragon and the Dark coverage in this battle. There's not really a good Fairy type on my opponent's team. There is a Carbink, though I expect that Pokemon to either not come or to be dealt with much earlier in the battle. But we need Scarf Outrage on this team. One, because if it's a non-Fairy Tornadus Therian, we need the ability to check it after Stealth Rocks with a powerful Choice Scarfer. Because that Pokemon, like I said, while I'm not like super concerned, like once this game goes along, like my Pokemon like Iron Crown, Gliscor, and such, we'll take chip and we'll die eventually. And then the Regenerate on Torn, we'll keep that around for a while. So we need to have a good way to check non-Fairy Tornadus Therian. This is a good way to do it. It also checks the Dragon Dance Dragonite if that comes to play here. But most likely this is just kind of a failsafe, while the Iron Valiant is going to be kind of coming in a lot more in situations to put a lot more pressure with Moonblast. This is very much kind of like a failsafe Choice Scarf user, and that we needed to check the Dragonite if need be, needed to check the Tornadus Therian, and hopefully get some key knockoffs to remove something like an Assault Vest from the Tornadus Therian. Gliscor is our rocker this week, a very, very standard Spit-F set. We want to get up Stealth Rocks very, very early in this battle, because Stealth Rocks are very crucial to deal damage to Pokemon like the Tornadus Therian, if it's not Boots. As I said, I kind of expect it to be Assault Vest most likely in this battle. Toxic will be very, very useful into that Pokemon as well. Nothing on this team really appreciates a Toxic. All things considered, like many of the common Gliscor switch-ins, you would probably expect to be, there's kind of not a lot, right? Like you can't really go hard Iron Moth a lot of the time, because if it's Spit Up, you just get Earthquaked on. I guess Samurot's one to switch into, but it doesn't want to appreciate a Toxic, especially if I have, what you'll see later, Rocky Helmet Gramble. Going to really punish that Pokemon. And then Toxicking Pokemon like the Tornadus and the Dragonite is going to really help mitigate, one, the Regenerator on the Tornadus, and then the Dragonite from trying to be a DD sweeper. And then Earthquake is our coverage move of choice because it just OHKOs the Iron Moth, which is very, very important. But otherwise, just very, very blanket Spit-F check for something like Tornadus Therian. We do have Electric as our Terra for that purpose, because it does give me a Hurricane resist with this Pokemon if we don't Terra the Iron Crown. But yeah, that's essentially the purpose of the Terra. We don't expect to use this Terra as one of our Terra Captains, but it is there in case we don't Terra the Iron Crown and we want to be able to resist the Tornadus Therian's Hurricanes. This Pokemon is going to be our lead here, and kind of the lead sequence that I really expect here in this battle is with the Terra Electric. I expect Torn to lead because, one, Torn's like the best lead my opponent has outside of the Samurott Hisui, and Samurott Hisui struggles to lead into a lot of my Pokemon. Iron Valiant leads well against it. Roaring Moon leads well against it. My Terra Electric Iron Crown's going to lead well into it. If I'm Gliscor, I could just protect and get my Toxic Orb off. Like, there's a lot of leads that just don't really allow for Samurott Hisui to do much productively. So my expectation is that they're going to lead Torn, and they're just going to U-turn out. They're going to see the Electric Terra, know that knockoff is not going to really be valuable, and they might have to take a lot of damage to do it. And they're just going to go into Iron Treads, because that's a generic, especially with Electric Terra, that's going to seemingly be a very good switch in to that Pokemon. And we do have Focus Blast on this set. So our goal here on turn 1, kind of a pre-planned sequence, is to lead this against Tornadus Therian and click Focus Blast on turn 1 to try to pick up that Iron Treads. As I said, these kind of Torn T comps can be really difficult for my team. If I can make an aggressive play early and just put the Treads at a position where it can't even switch in to like an Iron Valiant, that's going to make this game so much easier over the course of the battle. Otherwise, it's just an Assault Vest set. Psychic Shock is going to be really nice into the Chestnut. We do need something to pressure the Chestnut a little bit. It is not a super amazing Pokemon in this matchup, but like it is one that's going to come and have impact on the game to try to set up spikes and Leech Seed and etc. And then otherwise Volt Switch and Tacking on Cutter. This Pokemon will be able to come in on the Torn and Volt Switch for free, especially once that Iron Treads is out of the way. It'll be super useful. I'm bringing Rapid Spin here with another AV. This is a full AV to one, just completely lock Iron Moth out of the game. Just to prevent that Pokemon from being anywhere near a problem. Rapid Spin is really nice here because we do want to spin away any of the hazards that Samurott Hisui or the Chestnut want to set up in this battle. Because Spike Sacking is going to be pretty potent against my team to wear down Pokemon like the Iron Crown, like the Iron Valiant, and the Roaring Moon. We want to be able to bring these Pokemon in very often, and if they get spikes up very early, it's going to be difficult to do that. Knockoff is really nice here because one, I can nab items on the Torn, I can nab an item on the Chestnut, and more importantly, it gives me a way to actually pressure incoming Rotom that wants to spin block. Getting a knockoff on that Pokemon, removing random like Choice Scarves for like trick sets or just generic Scarf. Rotom, remove Colbur Berry that would hold back something like a Roaring Moon, potentially, or even like Rocky Helmet. There's so many items that are useful to remove on that Pokemon. And then Sludge Wave is a final move just to deal super effective damage to Chestnut, while hitting from the special side is going to be important against that specific Pokemon. And the final Pokemon on the team is my dedicated switch in to the Samurott Hisui. It is Rocky Helmet, Gramble, full defensive set here. I was considering, and I probably should have considered more, to have something like Thunder Wave here to pressure aggressive switches into the Tornadus Therian. Though I expected one of the more common switch into this was to be Rotom, at least defensive Rotom, like something like Rocky Helmet could be a way to switch into this, to at least kind of prevent it from being able to switch into Samurott Hisui so many times. So that's why Crunch is here, for example. Close Combat is a way to click aggressively into Iron Treads, and then Play Rough just generally gets stabbed. Clicks well into the Samurott Hisui. Close Combat also clicks well into the Samurott, so it gives me a little bit of a way to kind of ease, to kind of lower the variance against something like Iron Treads in the early game if it wants to switch in. And then Super Fang, dealing half damage is just nice against any of these switch-ins, right? Something like Iron Moth could want to switch in, for example, predicting something like a Play Rough or a Close Combat. And we get a Super Fang, take off half health, makes it so much easier to check in the mid-game. So that's the team. Let's get right into the battle. So it's time for the battle now. Our opponent has left the Rotom at home as well as the Carbink. I'm a little surprised by the Rotom, actually. No spin block. Seems, I don't want to say, it feels weird, right? I feel like spin block was pretty useful in this battle, but Rotom struggled to impact the battle otherwise. So I guess like this 6 makes sense. You kind of want to, I guess, spin block through pressuring the Tentacruel more than anything, I guess, is your expectation here. Terra Fairy is the Terra on the Tornadus Therian, and then Chestnut is Terra Steel. So I was expecting Poison Steel is kind of provide some of the same 50-50-ish nature with the Iron Valiant, though I think Poison may be a little more reliable in that, but it's hard because I could just click Psychic Move and then kind of play against both. That's a difficult choice. I don't know if that Pokemon's going to Terra anyway. I think Terra Fairy is very obvious on the Torn. Another reason, by the way, to have Sludge Wave on the Tentacruel is to pressure the Terra Fairy Tornadus Therian. As I said in the battle, in the team builder, my plan is to always lead with Iron Crown and to click Focus Blast. When I did Mox, this Pokemon missed literally every single time. Almost, I feel like I clicked this at Mox and missed. And it was just like, oh, I just want to see what this game looks like if I hit. I know what it looks like when I don't. I decided to not Terra there, mainly because I don't think they're going to knock off, right? Like, there's no way that you stay in a knockoff and take like a Terra Blast from Terra Electric Iron Crown with your Tornadus Therian, or risk like attacking on Cutter and Terra. Like, there's so many things that can go wrong if you stay in. So I decided, because it's a pre-planned turn, I decided to not Terra, save my Terra for the Gliscor if I need be, and I get a big Focus Blast off. Now, they revealed to be Choppleberry, interestingly enough, so I'm not able to get the kill here, but this Pokemon is half dead early on in the battle, which is super nice for my game plan. Makes it much more easy for me to actually manage something like the Tornadus Darien early on in this battle. Now the problem, and the reason why I went with this game plan, is I kind of don't have great plays into Iron Treads realistically. And the biggest problem I have here is I actually don't have the Toxic Orb off yet. So if I have Toxic Orb off, like there's a good argument for me to go Gliscor there. The problem is Knock is so free. I just can't risk losing my Toxic Orb just yet. Luckily for me, I can just go back into the Iron Crown as my opponent reveals Taunt on the Gramble. A little surprised that they clicked it on that turn. All things considered, really didn't expect that one too much. But this gives me kind of one of those free turns that I really want out of my Iron Crown to either, just click Tachyon Cutter or Focus Blast here. I do Terra this time because I think it's a little bit more likely they want to stand and just Knock now, given that I've shown that I want to be super aggressive. They go back into Iron Treads, predicting that I won't do the same play again. And of course I'm not going to. I don't need to get that aggressive at this point, especially where Tachyon is going to do a lot of damage. Now, Tachyon does put this Pokemon into range of the Rocky Helmet, actually, from the Gramble. So this crit on one of the Tachyons is actually pretty relevant over the course of this battle. So a little bit unfortunate for my opponent there. We do get the Iron Treads down early, which is super huge for this battle. Now, we had to expend one of my ways to switch into Samurott to do it, which isn't great. But overall, Iron Treads being down, that was the biggest thing I wanted to do in this battle. Get Iron Treads down early, and that makes my game plan so much easier to enact. The Iron Moth comes out. As I said, Tentacruel is such a lockdown answer for this Pokemon. Look at that, 26% from the discharge with the AV and the full Spit F. I'm going to take the 27 again. I go for the flip turn. I probably should have considered knockoff here. One of the ways that this really went wrong on Mox when we were testing against it was weakness policy agility. Was a little bit of a problem, though I figured with full health Gliscor, I was probably fine to just flip turn. I figured something like Torn was going to come in, but then again, I probably should Knock in that case anyway. So Knock was probably the better play, but flip turn reveals Rocky Helmet, so it actually doesn't punish me in this point. And it looks to be a little bit of a relatively defensive set, but I use this as a free opportunity to 1, go into Gliscor to get my Toxic Orb off, and 2, get my Stealth Rocks up. Stealth Rocks, super important into the Torn, super important into Dragonite if it is not Heavy Duty Boots. If it's CB, breaking the multi-skill is super important. So getting those rocks up, super nice. Now the problem is here, because my health on my Gliscor is so low, I kind of just want to sack off my Tentacruel at this point. The Tentacruel's job is for the Iron Moth primarily. Obviously we have other use against Torn that could be useful against it, that it could be used for, but Iron Crown is still 91%, so I'm okay with just letting the Torn go here, go into my Iron Crown. I know this will likely outspeed here, given the fact that, given some of the counts here on the flip turn, and given that I'm like 324, not 324, I looked at it with my speed. I have to look through my notes again, but I was almost certainly confident I was outspeeding this every time, given my set, so wasn't risking any HP to check the Torn. My opponent just goes straight into Chestnut on the Psyshock, so big turn there, put a lot of damage on that Pokemon as my opponent reveals Endure as I Volt Switch. So this is screaming Custap Berry. Like, this has to be Custap Berry. There's no other way that this could be anything else. So going to my Gramble here, just to kind of say, like, look, I'm probably going to eat something like a Wood Hammer here, get very aggressively, or they're probably just going to save it. I'll just play rough here. Obviously, this makes me a little weaker to Samurott if that just goes off and kills me. But if they do Wood Hammer there, they lose their Chestnut, I lose my Gramble, and we're in a 4v4 where I have 2 Choice Scarpers and Rocks up. That's something I think benefits me very, very greatly here. They go into the Iron Moth and just go for the Dazzling Gleam and kill off my Gramble. So we're just kind of in, not the 4v4, but we see, the Chestnut's in Endure range, so they don't really want to bring that in. This gives me a really good free knockoff turn with my Roaring Moon, but I'm just going to take the Iron Moth. They don't risk going into something like Torn or Samurott for no reason. And Samurott comes out here now, and I have to make, I don't want to say an aggressive switch. I have to go into Gliscor. I kind of have no switch at this point, right? I've kind of put myself into an awkward spot where, because I don't have Gramble, I just have no switch into Samurott. And Gliscor, while Gliscor is decent in this battle against the Torn, I've already Terra'd, and 've already got my rocks up and the spinner's gone. There's no real use for Gliscor in this battle. Not to the point that I'm willing to sacrifice HP on Iron Crown, Roaring Moon. Obviously, I'm just going to stay in a knockoff. It's not going to do anything. Or sacrifice or risk Iron Valiant, right? The fact that they Razor Shell covering that play is very, very good for them. It means I can't aggressively go Iron Valiant on that turn. This does allow me to go Iron Valiant on this turn, though, as they go for the Endure, as they go for the Moonblast. So this is another Custap Berry set. They're just like, I was very, I don't want to say confused. It was very interesting that they went for this kind of double Custap strategy, just trying to, like, I guess this is their game plan against Iron Valiant. But because of this, I know that I can just switch into Roaring Moon very safely. I know there's no way you click something like Sacred Sword there. That would be a very, very crazy click to make. I mean, if you do make it, that's like an unbelievable play. But at this point, I can just go right back into Roaring Moon. No, I live everything. The Custap Berry is down. I can just knock off and get the kill here. Get that Samurott out the way. And now Torn is in here. And we're at this situation where Chestnut, basically I just have to sack a Pokemon to Chestnut, because it's like going to be Custap Woodhammer probably from here. I just have to find a way to deal with the Dragonite, basically. Iron Crown should be able to hold the Torn back. And then we should be fine from there. Dragonite comes out, and it reveals to be a not heavy-duty boots. So my expectation of Choice Span to E-Speed was very, very high. Like, I was looking, I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's why I kind of elect to go for the Volt Switch here. I'm like, look, I'm thinking it's like, what do we click here on this turn? If it's E-Speed, I guess I take the hit here, right? And I get into a Pokemon like Iron Valiant for free, and I click Moonblast, and Moonblast is a kill. Given the HP this is already taken, the fact that rocks are up, Tornado Stare is going to die to that. So I'm fine to just go to Volt Switch and then just go sack off the Roaring Moon. I figure this is going to die to any hit. Earthquake comes out and it definitely dies. And it reveals to be Life Orb. So I can still take an extreme speed here from the Dragonite if I have to. But this is a situation where something's going to die. And the fact that they don't know about my Choice Scarf makes this play super powerful. They go Torn, kind of expecting to come in, take the hit, scare me out with Hurricane or Bleak Wind, and picking up the kill. But the fact that I'm Choice Scarf, double Choice Scarf even, means I'm going to guarantee this kill. And now, at this point, there's really nothing my opponent can do. I've kind of gotten to the position where we have the 2v2. They have to use their Chestnut at this point, because if they go Dragonite, I just kill them, right? It's the same position they just switched out of. They can't really E-Speed, I just kill them. And they go Chestnut, and I go Iron Crown, and win the game that way, or I can just stay in with this. They go Chestnut here early to try to, like, I guess, get me on the Iron Valiant. But I'm obviously just going to go Iron Crown here, take the Wood Hammer, lose the Iron Crown, Chestnut goes down, and now it's Iron Valiant at full HP versus Dragonite at like 3 HP, or 11 after the Stealth Rocks. I take the E-Speed obviously pretty well, not at risk of crit there either, and that is going to be a big first win of Autumn Seasonal. It was not the game plan for my opponent I was necessarily expecting with the double Endure Custap situation. But the game plan prep of getting the Iron Treads down early was super useful, super impactful, and kind of helped flip the matchup that, while I think was good, could have really gotten out of hand if I didn't have that early turn planned out. So really happy with how this battle went. Let's get into round number 2. Before we get into our matchup for round number 2 against Lou Rinaldi, make sure to go to the description of this video and join my Discord server. We're trying to build that out. If you want to help support me in Draft League tournaments and Wi-Fi leagues, make sure to join that. Join the front office. We do leagues in there every once in a while. You get updates on all the content we're doing. A place you definitely want to be if you want to stay up to date with everything that I am doing in Pokemon Draft League. So as I said, this is round number 2. We're playing against Lou Rinaldi at 1-0. Good start to the tournament. We got to keep going though. This is 10 weeks of Pokemon. It is a marathon, not a sprint. Lou Rinaldi's team is very, very interesting. He has Terra Great Tusk, Roaring Moon, Iron Moth, Walking Wake, Thundurus, Terra Manaphy, Torkoal, and Iron Leaves. A lot of things kind of stick out here. One, Terra Manaphy, really weird on a Sun team, right? Like on these Sun teams, you would expect like a Terra Moth, Terra Walking Wake angle and really lean into those Pokemon as offensive sweepers. This team doesn't do that for either of these Pokemon, electing to go with Great Tusk as this Terra Captain, which it's a good Terra Captain, one that I probably should have used in OLR when I was in that tournament. But the real thing is Terra Manaphy is really weird on these sort of Sun teams. With the fact that you're weakening the water moves, it makes it really, really difficult to actually leverage that Pokemon effectively in these battles. But I mean, there's one thing to note here besides all that. We got 4 Photosynthesis Pokemon. We got a Torkoal. Those Pokemon in the top 4 are going to be so difficult to deal with. Great Tusk with the Terra does make my Rotom game plan of switching into it just a little bit more difficult. That's going to be a tough Pokemon to deal with. Roaring Moon on a speed tie is going to be kind of annoying. It's going to lead both players into using Scarf, I think, for the most part. And luckily for me, at least, in this matchup, Iron Moth is not Terra again, which means Tentacruel can at least lock that Pokemon down, and then Walking Away can be locked down in a similar way by Tentacruel, at least for the early game. But then kind of from there, it's interesting to see what you do past the top 4. You probably need the Torkoal, right, to make the Sun work on a team concept like this. Thundurus is a Pokemon that I was really worried about. I think Iron Crown with the Terra can check it very, very effectively, but like T-Wave is pretty decent against my team. Would require Gliscor to be used in that slot. Manaphy, while it is a Sun team, Terra Manaphy actually had a lot of sets with Takard, for example, that we tested against in prep and was actually kind of difficult to deal with. So that's one that this team is going to be very conscious of. And then Iron Leaves is a Pokemon that I use to good effect in LTM. Now, it doesn't have Terra here, and this is not low tier, so probably not going to be as effective, and I don't expect it to come in this battle. So the team that I'm bringing this week, we have a Babiri Berry, Iron Valiant. So we have Encore, Vacuum Wave, Moonblast, and Psyshock. And the reason we have Babiri Berry is I really couldn't find any item that was useful on this Pokemon almost all week. Everything I tried just didn't come up, and I'm like, look, there's probably going to be a situation in the battle where Scarf Roaring Moon comes out and needs to Iron Head Iron Valiant, and maybe I can get a Resist Berry off and bait it that way. My hope is to get it chipped, obviously, to the point with hazards and such that Vacuum Wave kills it. But let's say that's not the case. I Moonblast, get the kill. It is what it is. Encore is a really good move. There's a lot of U-turn on this team, a lot of momentum, which means that I can prevent stuff like Bulk Up, Great Tusk from getting out of hand. The Moonblast is obviously a very, very spammable move into this team in general. The only thing that really switches in is the Torkoal, and then Psyshock gives me a good move to not damage the Torkoal, but gives me a good move into something like the Iron Moth, which is a Pokemon we'll probably need to check out of Sun a decent amount of the time with the Iron Valiant. We're going with the Choice Scarf Roaring Moon once again. 4 attacks, no U-turn this time. We really need all the coverage moves this week, and we're going Choice Scarf because my opponent does have Roaring Moon as well. We need to at least guarantee the 50-50 on the speed tie, right? Like, that just has to be done to make this Pokemon effective in this matchup. All 4 coverage moves are going to be important. Obviously, given the fact that my opponent has kind of a wide variety of Pokemon that all do different things, like we need Dragon coverage for the Walking Wake. Earthquake is really nice to have for the Iron Moth if it's at high HP. Knockoff is obviously just a very, very spammable move. And then Iron Head is decent for random Terra Fairies that come up. Terra Fairy Manaphy is like a potential that can come up in this battle, or Fairy Tusk. Options that, you know, are potentially there, but, you know, ones that we need to be prepared for more often than just having the U-turn on the set. We have pretty standard Spit F Gliscor again. This is what I'm talking about. We have a lot of U-turn, right? Like, one of the ways that we need to make sure that we don't lose this battle is that something like Bulk Up Great Tusk. Obviously, U-turn into Iron Valiant is going to kind of take care of that. But this Spit F Gliscor 1 is also, once again, very good against the Iron Moth. It is Terra Fairy, which I can use defensively against Walking Wake if need be to give me a secondary answer to that Pokemon. The hope, though, is that something like Iron Valiant is able to check that Pokemon and get rid of it early. And this is, once again, it's my only rocker, so it's going to set up rocks again this week. Dragon Terra on the Iron Crown. This is just a standard Assault Vest. Modest 252 as well, which is kind of the big thing for this set. Is while I do want it to be able to switch into Pokemon like the Walking Wake, eat those Draco Meteors, I need to be able to put offensive pressure on Pokemon that come in. Something like Torkoal is going to want to come in on this Pokemon. It's probably the best thing to come in. A Pokemon like Roaring Moon might want to get aggressive, which if it tries to switch into a Tachyon Cutter, it's going to take a lot of damage. Definitely getting it to a point where it's in range of that Vacuum Wave. And then Volt Switch is very, very powerful into this team, especially with the 252 modest investment. We saw last week it's this battle. I almost spoiled this battle a little bit. But Pokemon like Great Tusk, for example, can't come in, right? So like Volt Switch is super spammable against this team. And this will just be a very, very powerful offensive breaker. Another Assault Vest user, Tentacruel. Once again, this Pokemon's very, very good into the Iron Moth, and it's decent into the Walking Wake. We can at least remove an item on the Walking Wake, which if it's Choice Scarf will be very critical to align my Iron Valiant to be able to check it. And it is obviously a rapid spinner. We need spin on this team. We want to have our own rocks up and keep my opponent's rocks off my side of the field. That's going to make the game plan of this very highly offensive game plan work just in my favor, just a little bit more. And then Rotom is Colbur Berry. We're playing against Great Tusk, so we want to have the Colbur Berry to be able to eat those knockoffs and then throw back a Will-O-Wisp or bring all its HP back with a Pain Split. This is a very, very common way to manage Pokemon like the Great Tusk. So that's the team. Let's get into the battle. It's time now for the battle against Lou Rinaldi. He leads Torkoal. This was obviously always going to be expected, right? There's no way that you're not going to lead Torkoal. Get that sun up. It's so important to the viability of this team. My lead was always going to be Gliscor because I want to get my Toxic Orb off. There's a lot of random knockoffs on this team that could be kind of problematic. Not many of them I'm going to switch into, but Roaring Moon would be the main one, and I want to get my Toxic Orb off as quickly as possible. I expect them to rock generally anyway, and I could have rocked there, but the risk of just getting Lava Plume burned was just like, there's just no reason to risk that. My opponent goes into Manaphy, and our answer to this is the Assault Vest Iron Crown. We take an Ice Beam here. Obviously, our Terras aren't really designed to deal anything with the Manaphy, but something like Calm Mind Manaphy was very, very powerful in this matchup, and I want to be prepared for it, and Iron Crown Modest Psyshock was dealing so much damage, so really, really good to get this Pokemon in and start pressuring it early. My opponent's was using Great Tusk, and as I said in the team builder, I really did not expect Great Tusk to want to come into Iron Crown to Brolog a Volt Switch, especially early. Was very surprised to see that turn, in all honesty. Obviously, like, Volt Switch was a play that I made in Mox a decent amount of the time, but only when my opponent revealed that they were willing to go into the Roaring Moon. And they hadn't really shown that yet. I'm like, they could still be Calm Mind here and use my Iron Crown as an opportunity to get Calm Mind set up. The Terras in this battle, by the way, on my opponent's side, are Flying Manaphy and Poison Great Tusk. So the Poison... Luckily for me, I had the Psychic coverage on the Iron Valiant, so that doesn't matter. And the Flying Terra was actually kind of interesting because we considered Ogerpon as a way to answer some of these, setup Manaphy sets. And Terra Flying would actually have been a great way for them to get around that. So, luckily for me, they just switched their Great Tusk and take a lot of damage and put in a situation where it really just has to basically get sacked off here or lose a lot of value. My opponent does make the double here, though, into Roaring Moon to catch my Rotom. I do have the Colbur Berry, so I'm thinking it's like, look, the speed gets boosted. There's like literally nothing that can happen to kill my Rotom at this point because it's speed booster. And I'm thinking like, let me use my Colbur Berry to get this thing burned. The Great Tusk is already super weak. It's already not going to Terra. It's not going to be a super big threat. We at least save the Rotom for spin blocking later, so that's going to at least stop that aspect of the Great Tusk. And we burn one of the biggest threats in this matchup on my opponent's side. Now we just need to remove the item from the Walking Wake, and it is home free here for the rest of this battle. I just go Gliscor. As I said, this is why I wanted to get my Gliscor in on the lead, so I can get this Toxic Orb off immediately and be able to switch into Roaring Moon. That's still doing a boatload. That's pretty much Choice Banded confirmed at this point. And that's why I wanted to get the Toxic Orb off early, so I could switch into something like the Roaring Moon in the mid-game. We go into Iron Valiant here. This is the freest vacuum wave of my life. This Pokemon is basically dead. Time for my opponent to get rid of it. They go into their Great Tusk. I could have Moonblasted, predicting that. It is what it is. Then I go for the Moonblast again, which, like, in theory could be risky to not just, like, click the Psychic move there. But one, there's no way they're tearing. And two, even if they do, it's going to kill. So, like... maybe like technically optimal to Psyshock there, but you know what? Hey, winners win. We're going to click Moonblast and preserve a little bit of information. My opponent goes back into Torkoal. So Great Tusk, one of the biggest offensive threats that they have, is now gone. Roaring Moon is burned. And their two last Pokemon, both of them at least get held back by Tentacruel pretty effectively. And if it's Choice Scarf Walking Wake, is one not doing a lot of damage, and if you remove the Choice Scarf, Iron Valiant should just be able to clean up the rest of this game. Torkoal comes out here though, and we do have to sack the Rotom at this point. Revealing Flare Blitz is interesting in terms of like how much damage that Pokemon can do in the mid game, but Rotom now literally has no use with Great Tusk dead, so we might as well just sack it off, get a free switch into Gliscor. This one allows me to get a little bit of health back, or at least a little health off on this Gliscor. My opponent does go for the Rapid Spin here to remove my hazards, and given the fact that it's Flare Blitz, I know I'm Spit F, but I'm okay to just set up my rocks here. Again, get these back up, try to spin, no problem. We're wasting away these Sun turns, and I can just go freely into my Tentacruel, leverage this Pokemon. We see the Speed Booster, the Hydro Steam comes out, it does nothing. And now my opponent's just content to sack off the Roaring Moon. I was kind of hopeful they would give me the item on the Walking Wake, but they're not going to, obviously. And then the obvious choice band gets revealed on that knockoff from the Roaring Moon. And now 2 of their biggest threats are gone. They go back into Walking Wake. This is their best way to break Tentacruel. And yeah, I guess if you're doing 18, that's not really helping. And they do reveal to be Choice Scarf, so another big piece of my opponent's team down. As I said, we really had to be mindful of the Choice Scarf to make sure that that Pokemon wasn't able to kind of kill my Iron Valiant here in the mid game. And now I can use my Iron Valiant to check that Pokemon. And now Iron Valiant's just going to be able to come in and get a kill here at this point. My opponent, I guess, does elect to kind of play a sequence to where they get Tentacruel to stay in and not kill it, which means Manaphy gets a free turn here. But my Iron Crown is still at 87% health. So at least to beat up on these setup Manaphy's, still at really, really good HP level to be able to do that. I just go for the Side Shock, get some chip down on that Pokemon, and then my opponent elects to go to Torkoal. They kind of see the writings on the wall here a little bit, right? Like, the game is quickly falling apart. They just sack the Torkoal off, go into Iron Moth, but I do have the Terra for this Iron Moth. So they go for the Flamethrower. I live that. They do burn me, which is a little bit unfortunate, but I don't think it's going to matter. I think the Ice Beam is going to kill me either way from the Manaphy here right after. And that is going to be, I would say, a pretty convincing win here in the battle against Lou Rinaldi. The game plan just was played to perfection, I think. The sack on the Great Tusk early was, I think, a pretty, unfortunately, bad play for my opponent to lose all that HP. I understand the vision of trying to block Volt Switch, but I just don't think that's the kind of play you can make early on. I like going Roaring Moon aggressively there a lot more to put the pressure on my team. And while I think obviously I just go Gliscor, get my get a U-turn off, I think that might have been more of a beneficial play for them to make. But overall, pretty convincing win, getting the Roaring Moon out early, getting the Great Tusk out early, made this game a lot easier for me to manage once the only things to break Tentacruel were very susceptible to the knockoff. So that's round 2. Let's get into round 3 at 2-0. With a chance to go 3-0 in round 3, we get paired against a former seasonal champion, Swaggy Boy Swagata Mitra on Smogon. This is a big matchup. I think they won not the last one, but the one prior to that. I think PTK won the last one. So definitely in round 3, we've had a pretty difficult run-in of battles with the DCL player into Lou Rinaldi and now into one of the former seasonal champions. So definitely, this is what happens when you get into these big tournaments. Always a lot of good players, especially once you start to win some games. This is my opponent's team, Tornadus Therian with the Terra, Garchomp, DOS, Blastoise, Mandibuzz, Carbink, again, see another one of those, Terra, Salazzle, and Scizor. This is a really interesting matchup. Terra Torn, we played it against week 1, and our Iron Crown is pretty good into that Pokemon. Choice Scarf, Iron Valiant was also very useful in the matchup that time around. Choice Scarf, Iron Valiant seems a little bit less potent here in this matchup. I was thinking about Choice Scarf, but I'm going with the specific item I need, I think, to get around certain counterplay I expect here. The big problem for me in this matchup is kind of twofold. It's one of the DOS. This team is not like it's bad into DOS. I think the problem I have is I have so many things to check DOS that want to do other things, like check the Torn, for example, that DOS can become a problem in the late game. And then Garchomp's a really, really big problem to my team outside of Granbull. Considering how I want to play something like the Gliscor, for example, it's not really going to be a good way to handle that Garchomp. But Granbull, luckily, is kind of a lockdown answer to that Pokemon with the Intimidate the Fairy type. Otherwise, looking at this matchup, those are kind of the 3 main threats along the top. The rest kind of isn't that scary. Salazzle could tear into something threatening, but the Tornadus has to be the Terra, right? Versus something like Salazzle. Carbink has proven to be a decent defensive switch into some of the Pokemon on my team. Mandibuzz can be hard to break. It does actually live Moonblast at like decent HP to throw a Brave Bird back, so we are going to actually have to chip that Pokemon to kill it. And then something like Scizor can be very, very problematic with the Swords Dance set in the right opportunity. So now let's get into the team. We have Iron Valiant with Babiri Berry, and the main goal of this set is obviously to break with Iron Valiant. Close combat Moonblast spam is very powerful. Psycho Cut, very useful against random Terras that could just come up in this battle that are like Terra Poison. It's a decent neutral click. It's fine. It's not going to be clicked a lot or maybe even ever in this battle, but kind of the sauce with this set is after a hazard damage, Moonblast plus Fire Punch kills Scizor. Pretty much all Scizor sets. And that's why we had the Babiri Berry, because our goal here with this set is to bait the Scizor. Scizor can actually be pretty good into my team. It's hard for me to actually deal a lot of damage to it. outside of something like maybe the Iron Crown, though even that is not really a productive use of time. So kind of our goal is to bait that Pokemon here in this matchup with the Fire Punch Moonblast combination after Hazards. Hazards are pretty easy to get up with their Gliscor in this battle. So that's the goal of this set, and once that's done, it's going to kind of do what it always does, is break with close combat and Moonblast and just open up a path for Choice Scarf Roaring Moon and other sets we have. As I said, Choice Scarf Roaring Moon, it's back, it's powerful, you know what it does. It clicks Dragon Claw, Knockoff, and U-Turn if need be. Earthquake is the final move. It gives a coverage move for the Carbink that's not Iron Head. Iron Head felt a little bit awkward to click into stuff like Scizor. I really didn't have a good perspective on what the final move should be. Maybe like if there's random Terra Poisons that were something we were seeing in testing for this matchup that could come up. So I decided, like, let's just go with Earthquake. I'm going to be clicking Dragon and Knockoff anyway. Like, it doesn't matter too much what I go with in this slot. So Choice Scarf Roaring Moon out there to outspeed the Tornadus Therian, and that's another reason to use Earthquake here instead of the Iron Head, is because of Terra Poison on that Pokemon specifically. Does a little bit more damage, so it doesn't matter too much. I wouldn't worry too much about this. Gliscor, we have Toxic because it's going to be nice to Toxic Pokemon like Mandibuzz, like Blastoise. Hell, even Pokemon like Tornadus Therian, if it tears into a Fairy type, will be nice to Toxic. Pokemon like the Garchomp. A lot of things that we want to Toxic. This is Spidef, and we do have Earthquake to be able to OHKO that Salazzle if it wants to stay in and just spam Overheat against us. We will be able to live that very comfortably, and then we can set up our Stealth Rocks. This is Terra Water, though I don't really expect the Terra Water to come up really at all in this battle. It's not super useful and not kind of the intention. It's merely there as a scare tactic. What we really want to get the Terra off with is our lead. This Pokemon, when I was testing, I was playing battles against OG Albina, Dietite Jason, all my guys. And this set, like, would 6-0 off lead, especially against Tornadus Therian lead. So this is our lead. Our goal is just click agility, try to bait our opponent into knocking off on turn 1. The fire is a little bit deceptive of what it's trying to do. Playing to the weakness policy with the fire type is not necessarily what my opponent might expect. So if they just lead Torn, knock off into this turn 1 as a agility, they might just straight up lose the game outright with this set. Like, they won't be able to outspeed it. Stored Power basically kills everything. The thing is, they can get maybe close to the combination of Mandibuzz and Scizor, but the Terra Fire with the Terra Blast is going to be there to kind of save the day on that one. So this set is kind of designed to lead and just break open a hole through my opponent's team. Take like 2-3 Pokemon at least with me, and that makes my Iron Valiant Roaring Moon game plan so much more effective. We have Rocky Helmet Tentacruel. This is a very Spidef Tentacruel. The goal for this set is obviously to come in and take hits from Salazzle for the most part. It can come in on Blastoise a decent amount. The Rocky Helmet here is really important because you need to punish U-turns from the Mandibuzz and the Blastoise on the flip turn. Specifically, we can even punish U-turns from Scizor if it's like a more bulky set. The Rocky Helmet's really nice to keep those Pokemon on range, especially something like Mandibuzz, which needs to be at like 75-85% to die from Moonblast consistently from the Iron Valiant. So this Rocky Helmet's super crucial to that game plan. And then Granbull is Air Balloon, Intimidate with a few little kind of intricacies that there, like T-Wave is going to be nice to hit something like the Tornadus Therian if it wants to get aggressive. Super Fang does a lot of damage. And then Roar just to like force out the Garchomp if we need to. But this is the lockdown Garchomp answer. That is the team. Let's get into the battle for round number 3. So let's get into the battle. My opponent has left the Carbink and the Blastoise behind. I'm a little surprised in the Blastoise, and thought it actually had a little bit of use here. Jason, when we were mocking, actually made good effort with like a mixed Earthquake set that actually like did a lot against a lot of my lead combinations. The Terras on my opponent's side are Terra Fairy, so it ends up being Fairy again, which makes sense, right? Like it's kind of logical. I think Poison has some good justification as well against my team. And then Terra Fire on the Salazzle, though if it's Terra Fairy Torn, like it's gonna be Torn that's tearing here in this spot. Now that does mean though is that my lead for Iron Crown is a little less potent into the Torn. My opponent just leads a Salazzle, which is like, all right, well, my gimmick of going for something crazy here is just not going to work, right? We're going to go right into Tentacruel here, take that hit, and we get knocked off here. And I was considering, it's like, what if I just go hard Iron Crown and they knock off? Then it gets real crazy, right? The problem is I take too much damage from something like the Mandibuzz and Scizor in combination that I can't actually do much besides kill one Pokemon. So I'd rather just put myself in a position to kind of go for that later in the game and kind of preserve that still. Hopefully getting some chip on the Mandibuzz to make Tachyon a guaranteed OHKO, which means I don't have to worry about getting randomly dying to like Scizor Bullet Punch from Choice Band. So we lose the Rocky Helmet, which is kind of annoying, but we get the Toxic off on the Torn, which is obviously super awesome to get that going. Get a little flip turn out here, and Torn is in a pretty bad spot. I get the crown in here. Now, I go for the agility here, which like kind of was like a super face up that I was going to go for some gimmick here. Like, this now kind of reveals the set. There's no way they're knocking off with the toxic damage racking up like that. Should have just gone for like attacking on cutter, put some pressure on the Mandibuzz, but in good news, they whirlwind instead of roosting there, which is actually pretty nice for me, probably predicting a Calm Mind there. Gramble does come out though, reveal the balloon though. The balloon is kind of face up in this matchup for the most part. I'm not really, if it's coming, you know what it's there for, right? It's not going to be too complicated. I go for the knockoff here. Knockoff, obviously super free click against the Mandibuzz. That doesn't want to lose its boots because of the Iron Valiant calcs, and nothing else wants to take this knockoff, especially this Torn. Loses the Assault Vest and becomes so much less effective in this battle. I dodge the Bleak Wind, Expert Dodge, or a Dodge. And now I can go into my Gliscor. This allows me to, 1, get my Toxic Orb off, and 2, get my Stealth Rocks up. Super important here in this battle. As the Scizor comes out, my Rocks are up, and we can just go right into Iron Crown here and pressure this Pokemon with the Terra Blast for the fire. We see the default come out, so it's probably a little bit more of a defensive set at this point. My opponent's obviously going to switch out. At this point, I know I can just go for the Tachyon Cutter. My goal here, obviously, is to put some chip damage on this Mandibuzz if I can. Either get my Rocks back up here or go for a Toxic. As I said, that Pokemon needs to be in a position where it's taken like 25 to 30%. Now, in comes the Salazzle hard on my Gliscor, which is a very bold play, especially where I'm Terra Water. I get my Stealth Rocks up, though, and I'm thinking, it's like, well, I'm Spit-Off. I could take this Overheat. They didn't Terra, so I know I can take it. It's going to put a lot of damage on my Pokemon, but against something like a Mandibuzz, I'm definitely going to be able to get my health back at some point, right? So it's going to stay in, drop an Earthquake, take the Salazzle, and that is one of the threats out of the way on this team. Hopefully going to make this game just that little bit easier. Unfortunately, my opponent goes DOS here, goes for the knockoff, deals a million damage, activates my pretty telegraphed weakness policy at this point. And I could have Terra'd there, actually, to live that and then go for the kill on the DOS. But I decided to save my Terra Water on the Gliscor. Maybe an oversight, actually, now that I think about it. I kind of figured they would go for like a Shadow Ball or something like that to guarantee the kill. I'm a little surprised they knocked off. So, like, I felt like there was a decent enough chance if I used my Terra there, I was going to get nothing out of it. So, I guess the way that played out, a little bit unfortunate, but it is what it is. I can go Roaring Moon, though. This is the freest U-turn I've ever had in my life. JK, I'm clicking knockoff because nothing here wants to switch to that knockoff. Mandibuzz is like the key switch in here, right? And if I get the knockoff, these hazards are up. That's going to make it so much more difficult for that Pokemon to come in, or for me to, so much easier for me to deal with that with Iron Valiant. So knockoff, super awesome. Remove the item there. This thing doesn't have roost, so this thing is now perma-chipped. The rest of the battle, I go for a fast flip turn. I mean, this is always outspeeding, right? I'm not min-speed on this set, unfortunately, which is kind of a bot move. Gliscor comes back in, and I kind of expect this to be defensive, right? We've seen defog knockoff. Like, this surely is some sort of, like, defensive set. It was boots. JK, there's Sword Sands come out. It's like, oh, that's a little bit of a problem. Bullet Punch comes out. I do live that, though, and kill with the Earthquake, so we are in a perfect spot right now. The only problem is the DOS is going to potentially put up a little bit of pressure in my team. My opponent is running out of sacks for the Roaring Moon, though, and my opponent going Garchomp here gives me a perfect opportunity to go into my Gramble. Gramble can kind of lock this Pokemon out, force it to go for a little bit of a coverage move here. It does have the Liquidation as its coverage move instead of a super effective move for the Gramble. And that play rough just puts it in range of basically every hit that I have. Earthquake drops the Pokemon, but we can go Roaring Moon. Just go for the knockoff. Knockoff still continues to be great, despite the fact that like U-turn technically is quote-unquote free. But like U-turning here is such a throw, right? They either sack the Garchomp, give you the item on the Mandibuzz, or give you another Pokemon, right? Like, it's just so much upside here to knock off. And then my opponent can go Mandibuzz. I'm like, why don't I just take the item off of this, right? Like, what can they even do to me? Like, U-turn? Yeah, I'll take your item for free on a U-turn. Now my opponent is able to go into the Torn. I don't know. It's hard for them to know, right? Like, I guess they have to bank on me being Scarf at this point to get anything going. At this point, there's really not much they can do if I'm like some other set. I guess they would be faster in that case, but yeah, they'd be faster in that case. So it's either I'm Scarf and locked in that, or they're faster. But yeah, like I can just go Tentacruel and sack this Pokemon off, right? Like this Pokemon has no use for me at this point. We're in kind of basically a sack game at this point. Iron Valiant comes in because of the knockoff, because of the rocks up. This is a guaranteed KO against anything that wants to come in. And now Deoxys is going to come in, and I basically have the win here. Earthquake is kind of nice in this sequence because it's going to be nice against the Torn. But at this point, I basically have the win unless they like switch my Pokemon like 5 times. Iron Valiant comes in. They try to get aggressive here with a superpower, predicting me to go Roaring Moon, which I think like I am going to sack a Pokemon here, but I figured like Roaring Moon is definitely not the sack, right? I guess they might expect me to be Choice Scarf and switch out, but if I'm Scarf, I stay in. So I don't know. I think they're just trying to go for like play for a choke, which is totally fair, right? You got to play for something. And Terra Blast comes out from the Torn here, but I'm able to just go right into the Roaring Moon and just drop an Earthquake, and this Pokemon is dead. And that is a big 2-0 win against a former champion of the seasonal tournaments. It was like a winter seasonal that they won. So really, really good for me. We're 3-0 to start this tournament. Off on a little bit of a run. This team is, in my building with this team, is starting to really kind of come together here. So, you know, it's been a while since I've felt confident about a team that I've had in like a tournament or a league, but this one's definitely starting to feel like it. So going into round 4 of Autumn Seasonal, we're playing against Silao, who I think is a French player on the Smogon normal format side, like playing monotype and stuff like that. So not on the Draft League side, more on like the standard Smogon metagame side. 3-0, big matchup. We're playing against another great Tusk team. They also have Enamorous Terra, Sneasler, Jirachi, Mandibuzz, Basculegion, Gudra, and Carbink. The real thing that it kind of comes really at the forefront of this matchup is Basculegion is so good into my team. I was really worried about Terra Fairy a lot of the time in the builder, and that I was worried that my opponent was going to take away the option to go aggressively into Roaring Moon at least once throughout the battle on the Basculegion and put pressure that way. Roaring Moon, while there's a great Tusk there, we have the Rotom, which is like such a great Tusk answer. There are ways for us to damage that great Tusk early that, you know, I'm kind of hoping it's like maybe I can get a really powerful knockoff somewhere that kind of catches Enamorous T taking a lot of damage, removes the item from Mandibuzz to allow Iron Valiant to check that. Another thing that kind of comes up again in this battle. That Pokemon, though, is very tough. Ogerpon can switch in once. Like, we need to have a game plan that leads well into the Basculegion. While not sacrificing a lot of points against something like the Sneasler, for example, with an Ogerpon lead. The rest of the team, though, like, generally, what's really nice about this matchup is Iron Valiant is faster than pretty much everything on my opponent's team, bar the Sneasler. And as long as their Toxic Orb is off on the Gliscor can really just hold that Sneasler back for basically the majority of the game. That is basically the game plan we're going with here in this battle, is try to leverage our Iron Valiant to really just break through my opponent's team. Jirachi can't really switch in more than once. You know, if we get like a Stealth Rock up, a Moonblast and a Stealth Rock, like it can only switch in once before it dies to close combat. Mandibuzz obviously struggles to switch in. It can check Basculegion as long as it's not Choice Scarf. I think Choice Band makes the most sense here, considering some of the play patterns I didn't want to do with it. Obviously, Treks Rate Test. Like, this matchup is tailor-made for Iron Valiant to have a big impact. We just need to have good counterplay into the Sneasler and make sure that Basculegion doesn't take too many of our Pokemon before we can get Iron Valiant going. And now getting into the team we've brought, Life Orb Iron Valiant is the perfect way to take advantage of Iron Valiant in this matchup. A little bit of an odd EV spread considering the fact that we have a lot of physical moves and Moonblast, but all of our investment is on the physical side and nothing really on the special side. The main reason for that is Moonblast is only really super relevant in terms of calc-wise against the Mandibuzz, and as long as we knock off the item at some point, which we can expect to do on this team between Ogerpon and Roaring Moon, after Stealth Procs, this will be a kill. So we're not too super concerned with that. We can put a little bit of HP in there to help take some, you know, potential random hits that we might have to. There's not a lot that we can really take in this matchup, all things considered, but you know, the Moonblast calc's honestly not really impacted that much. The big thing you'll see here is we do have Shadow Sneak just as a way to kind of have extra priority against something like the Sneasler in the endgame if need be, or random Scarfers like Scarf and Amorous. The only other move that's really worth mentioning, Psycho Cut. As I said, I kind of protecting against a lot of Terra Poisons that we could expect to see in these matchups. Hasn't really come yet, but something I expect our opponents to bring at some point in this tournament. Choice Scarf Roaring Moon is once again the Mon always on the team sheet. It feels like it is a really good Scarfer. I would like to see more opportunity for it to be a setup set, but we need some way to check non-Choice Scarf Sneasler offensively in a situation where we have to utilize our Gliscor elsewhere. And Scarf Knockoff is pretty good into this team, all things considered. I don't have Dragon coverage, which might leave me a little bit weak in certain situations, though I think Earthquake and Ironhead, given the potential Terra types that we could see on the Enamorous, is good enough coverage for that. And then U-turn into Iron Valiant is going to be such a powerful play pattern in this battle that I think this should be fine. Not having Dragonclaw might come up against the Bastia Legion. I'm not 100% sure. You'd always like to get rid of that item anyway, and then you can just kill with something else. Like, I don't know. It's one thing that could be a problem with Shadow Sneak, obviously, on Iron Valiant. Really good for Bastia Legion as well. But I think dropping the Dragon coverage to have Earthquake Ironhead really makes sure that if it is Scarf Enamorous, we do have a move to guarantee to hit that for super effective. Because if it's not Fairy, it could be Steel or something like that to have a super effective move. Against Iron Valiant from a Choice Scarf set, obviously I guess Moonblast technically doesn't anyway, but it could be Poison. There's a lot of things that it could be, I guess is what I'm getting at. And Earthquake covers the Poison, which I think it could be. Gliscor here, sorry, I'm waffling today. You could tell I haven't done these commentaries in a while as I record these kind of over the course of the next like 3 months that I'm doing this. Gliscor here, Toxic Aura, Poison Heal. This is a standard Gliscor set. I really want to bring Swords Dance. I feel like Swords Dance would be so good in this team and so good in these battles, but the defensive Gliscor is just so important every week, it feels like. The key here is dual Wing Beat. I wanted a move that would break through Focus Sash on the Sneasler. Not that like SD Unburdened is going to break through the Gliscor, but I figured that would be nice just to have that option if need be, in case Gliscor had to take a lot of damage elsewhere against like Great Tusk. Dual Wing Beat is also super effective against the Great Tusk. That Pokemon can't Terra in this battle, so it will always be the fighting type. So it does give a little bit of that if it wants to go for the close combat, drop its defenses. We can deal a lot of damage that way. And then U-turn is just generally important, mainly to prevent stuff like the Enamorous from trying to switch in aggressively on something like an Earthquake. We can use momentum, get into Pokemon like Iron Crown to pressure that Pokemon offensively. And the Water Terra type is there basically just to give me an additional way to switch into the Bastia Legion if need be. And that's likely where the damage, if it would come on this Pokemon, will come from, is taking damage from that Bastia Legion and U-turning out into something else. Iron Crown, Assault Vest. I've used a lot of Assault Vest Iron Crown. It's a set that I've really come to like on this specific build. This is a really good set to answer Enamorous in this matchup. We're going for the Poison typing this time. Mainly the reason to go Poison, it was a tough typing to figure out what I want to go for here. It preserved the immunity, the resistance to the Moonblast, which I think is really key for this set. But also in the late game, like randomly, like if I just don't have a lot of counterplay to Sneasler, as I said, like Bastia Legion is so problematic in this battle. If I have to use Gliscor for it, or just sack Gliscor to Bastia Legion to get positioning, this Terra type does gives me more access to counterplay to the Sneasler with Poison to resist both the Dire Claw, Gunk Shot, which I'm immune to anyway, but mainly to resist the close combat. Future Sight is also a really nice move here. I can get some nice like predictable turns with Future Sight, hopefully to get Iron Valiant in front of Mandibuzz, which would be really nice. Otherwise, Future Sight is a really difficult move for my opponents to manage, especially in situations where I think they're going to want to get Bastia Legion in as aggressively as possible. Ogerpon here, this is my counterplay lead basically to Bastia Legion. I want to knock off the Choice Band as early as possible, Synth and Leech Seed just to get as much health back as possible. This thing needs to be so healthy to have a positive impact on this battle against that Pokemon, because I want to use the Rocky Helmet with the Wave Crash potential as a way to deal damage to that. So this is very much a stopgap measure to answering that Bastia Legion, which is not great. I don't like that that's my game plan, but certainly one that will have to be good enough, I think, to a certain degree. And then finally, look, Cobra Berry Rotom. This is the best way to answer Great Tusk generally in this metagame. And if we're going to play Great Tusk all the time, we're going to keep bringing this set. So that is the team we have for round number 4. Let's get into the battle. And now it's time for the battle. We didn't really talk about the Guja or the Card Bank at all in the team builder, and kind of for the reason we expected here. I expected this to be a top 6 all of the way through. These are the Pokemon we were worried about the most. The Terra types are ground from the Great Tusk and ground from the Enamorus. So that was one thing I didn't really bring up in the team builder that I did consider it was ground Enamorus, but it's really difficult to prepare for the ground and kind of fairy coverage in this matchup realistically, especially on the side of the, what's it called? The Iron Crown. So I can take those relatively well and deal a lot of damage back still, so that's kind of what I'm relying on here for the most part. But otherwise, this is the matchup we expected. We also have water. I guess it's not ground Great Tusk. It's water Basket Legion. So I was really hoping for Ghost. It was one of the sets we tested against, but water. Obviously very, very powerful as well. And we lead off here, Jirachi. I decided to lead off my Gliscor here because I want to get the Toxic Orb off, because I think that's going to be relevant, especially if I have the Terra into the water type. And I make a really boneheaded play here that really just threw me back kind of this entire battle. I go for the Protect to get my Toxic Orb off. I should have Rock turn 1. I was like randomly scared of like lead Trek just like trying to get me with the Toxic Orb. And maybe this is like the safe play to do, is just to go for the Protect. But if I get my rocks up here, I create a really predictable turn for the Great Tusk. And now I'm in a situation where I do go to my Rotom. Pretty good counterplay here as the knock comes out. Eat my Colbur Berry, but I play into a set that I knew basically was going to happen in this battle. This came in all of the mocks. Basically was Lumberry Great Tusk. Really good against Rotom. I should have Pain Splitted here, and these are 2 turns that I think are just super, super painful for me to have clicked into. I can maybe see the turn 1 play being fine. I'm okay with that play kind of generally. But this one, if I Pain Split here, I live the next one. I can pressure with Shadow Ball, and Great Tusk is much less of a threat. I can even preserve this as a sack later. And at this point, I'm just like, oh my god, well, there goes my Rotom. And I've got no value for it. We didn't get any HP off the Great Tusk for this. Just did not play that one to perfection at all. Luckily enough, I am able to get my Iron Valiant in and get a Moonblast off. It's not dealing a lot to the Jirachi, but you kind of see what I say, right? With that, once I get Rocks up and another Moonblast, like this is going to be in CC range pretty quickly from this set. And I'm able to get my Gliscor back in. Unfortunately, the heal block comes out, which is a little bit annoying. I'm not going to be able to get my health back. Luckily enough, though, I don't get flinched here by the Serene Grace Jirachi, and my Stealth Rocks are up. And this should be pretty good now. Unfortunately, I don't have a Rotom to spin block here anymore. So we're going to have to be very, very smart playing around this set. Playing around the Great Tusk now. But at least the Rocks are up to hopefully pressure both the Enam and the Mandibuzz. As I just go for the U-turn here, get my Ogerpon in. And at this point, I didn't really have a great turn to go for there. I wanted to use Knockoff an Ogerpon to get rid of a potential Colbur Berry, which I kind of expected on this Pokemon. And in worst case, I get kind of what I was hoping for, was Knockoff on the Mandibuzz. And now it actually revealed to be Rocky Helmet. So that didn't matter too much. I was kind of hoping to get a Boots here. Removing Boots would have been super nice. And unfortunately, Ogerpon has taken a little bit of chip damage to do this. And now my opponent has gotten a situation where they can get their Great Tusk in. This is going to be able to get a big Rapid Spin off, which is super unfortunate for me. I'm going to have to use my Ogerpon to eat this Ice Spinner, take a good amount of chip damage, and now the second Ice Spinner comes out. So we've at least got good damage on the Great Tusk, which would have helped with, we would have gotten with the Rotom, hopefully. And they've elected to not Rapid Spin here also, which is really big for me. But Ogerpon, a Pokemon I needed to keep back the Basket Legion, is now gone as a result of an earlier play I made. Just really kind of that error is kind of compounding in on itself. Kind of really putting a lot of pressure on my team right now. And now my opponent goes into Mandibuzz here, which is really weird. I didn't expect them to sack this Pokemon off outright. I guess considering the knock and the fact that it's chipped already, maybe they didn't think it'd be useful. But they're going to get a free turn into Basket Legion here in the Terra Water. And I didn't really want to make this play this early, but I'm going to have to go into Roaring Moon here just to get something going on this turn, as it does go for the Terra Water Wave Crash. And I take a lot of damage. That is crazy damage. Basket Legion is starting to get chipped though, and I think we need to get into the 25-30% range for Shadow Sneak from Iron Valiant. So let's keep an eye on that calc as this battle goes, as Great Tusk comes in on the knockoff. Really good play there. This is the situation where not having the dragon coverage is really kind of crappy, is that like if I click a dragon move there, I'm able to put a lot of pressure on the Great Tusk. Now luckily for me, I can at least go into my Iron Crown here and try to threaten it. Now The problem with that is the rapid spin comes out, and I can't even threaten to be faster. So the hazards are removed. My opponent can just go for the headlong rush for free, and kind of that whole kind of bait and switch of hopefully trying to scare them with the outspeed and get a kill here and not going to work out. I'm basically going to have to protect up here to get kind of all my HP back to hopefully live this Ice Spinner. And I will leave the Ice Spinner because I am going to go for my Terra Water here. I figured the Terra Poison obviously would be nice for the Sneasler in the late game, but I have to get rid of this Great Tusk. I've just let it stick around and cause too much damage and too much pain on me in this battle, and it's just, we're just going to have to deal with it. I go for the Protect here, kind of trying to bait out whether my opponent wants to go for the Headlong Rush, and my opponent is now going to go into the Jirachi as I can just U-turn out into, at this point, Iron Valiant. It is now in range of close combat, which is why I do this instead of going Roaring Moon. Roaring Moon also is on a timer in terms of how many times it can come in the rest of this battle, where that's not really super the case for Iron Valiant. It can still come in a few times and utilize the Life Orb, considering it does resist the Stealth Rocks. And now the fact that rocks are not up is going to make this so much more difficult for me to actually pressure this Baskia Legion. And in comes Enamorous for free. We can go Iron Crown here. Iron Crown is going to be able to wall this set a decent amount. As you can see there with the Assault Vest not taking a lot. But we just go for the Tachyon Cutter here, trying to at least kill that Pokemon. I could have Volt Switched here to get in Iron Valiant again. Iron Valiant actually would have been really good to get in there. It's basically a Pokemon they couldn't switch into at that point. They could get really aggressive with Enamorous though, which would have been scary. But we are going to have to take the T-Wave here, which does add a little bit of inconsistency now to the rest of this battle. We could just get randomly paralyzed at a point that doesn't really help us. And Moonblast is free to click here. My opponent doesn't have a switch in to that move. And now this game looked really dire at the start, but we now have the Pokemon advantage, which, you know, I really was not expecting at all. Basket Legion is going to come in here, and we have to basically sack our Iron Valiant. Iron Valiant doesn't really provide much the rest of this battle, unfortunately. As you see there, the Shadow Sneak did 24, so a little bit less than I was kind of thinking we needed for the range. But you'll see here kind of where the HP Basket Legion gets to near the end. You know, 2 more turns of rocks would have been super, super valuable here. But we lose our Mon advantage immediately here, which would have been nice. And now I have to go into Gliscor on the Sneasler. Sneasler just goes for the close combat. That leads me to believe it's probably Scarf. And at this point, I have to do something, right? I just go for the dual wing beat. I think the double protect there was what my opponent was banking on me going for, because there are sets that kill here, but none of the Choice Scarf sets do. So I'm thinking it's like my best play to win this game is assume it's Choice Scarf. I'm able to go Iron Crown here on the Enam as it goes for a pretty good Earth Power. That is a great click from my opponent to make in that situation. I could have protected to predict that situation and maybe have stayed in with my Gliscor. But unfortunately, that's not going to work, as I have to go for the Iron Head here. And this is where the situation of the extra rocks damage would have been game-changing here, and why that Rotom play earlier is so devastating for the rocks to get off. Is if this had taken 2 more rocks, this then just dies to the next Iron Head here. I consider going for the flinch, but I think my best play here is honestly just to go Gliscor and see if my opponent will die. Sack it to the Wave Crash. I considered going there for the U-turn here. U-turn would have been pretty fire, but alas, I think I'm just out of Pokemon here anyway. I think what it's going to come down here, this battle really is the fact that I didn't use my Rotom as effectively as I should have. In comes the Basket Legion for the Aqua Jet to kill, and that is our first loss of the tournament. So really not the way I wanted to lose. It was the sequence that we had done in mocks, prepared against, you know, and it's just a frustrating way to lose, unfortunately, when you lose to something that you knew was coming and were prepared for. But we're still 3-1. This is a 10-round Swiss event. We need to go 8-2 or better to make it into the bracket stage of this tournament, and there's still plenty of tournament left to go. We picked up our first loss of the tournament, and we're back in round number 5 against, look, another great Tusk team. I don't know what this tournament wants from me. Luckily, I have Rotom right, but I feel like I played every single great Tusk under the sun in this tournament so far. But we're playing against Battlestorm, not a player I'm very familiar with at all, so not really sure what to expect. And while they do have a great Tusk team, it's a very different team than what we've seen at this point. We see a little bit of a snow spam angle with the Slowking Galar, Baxcalibur, and Terra Cetitan. Cetitan's not a Pokemon I think I've ever actually matched up against since I've really started playing Draft League again regularly. I think it's a Gen 8 Pokemon, so I played like one Sword and Shield League. I mean, basically Gen 9 is when I've come back, so not really a team concept that I've played against a lot. When I'm going into this builder, things that I'm thinking about here is, one, Iron Valiant has a really, really good matchup, despite the fact that I have to click kind of aggressively. Getting up hazards is going to be important to keep the Smogon Galar kind of checked. That's going to be a really tough Pokemon to break, and I'm going to have to, I think, make some aggressive turns on that Pokemon in this battle. Corviknight is a Pokemon that obviously can be very difficult, though the set that I'm running with Iron Valiant with Thunderbolt will at least be able to pressure that thing offensively. But what's really going to be difficult in this matchup is to handle the Sun aspect of this team. That's going to be or the Sun, yeah, the Snow aspect of this team is going to be very, very difficult. My team, I wouldn't say is ice weak. But Pokemon like Iron Crown might be required to do other jobs. And like the combination of Baxcalibur and Titan, like pushing my team, does stress my Iron Crown a lot. Like that is a lot of pressure to put on one Pokemon that we're going to have to manage in this battle. Not to mention that Greninja could be Battle Bond at the end and just like completely ruin my day. So this is going to be a very, very tough matchup and one I'm a little bit concerned with going in. But let's see the team that we're bringing. So starting off our team, we have Expert Belt Iron Valiant. That's got a lot of moves here that are going to be really, really important here. Vacuum Wave is really crucial for that Greninja, especially if it's Battle Bond. Now, if it's Battle Bond, there's a good chance that it's Water Shuriken, which with my minus speed F will be a little bit of a problem for Iron Valiant. But in the situations this not, it'll be very good. The situation this will really help with is the Baxcalibur, though. It's going to have to use Ice moves to deal with me. And given the fact that we have a little bit of defense in this, it will help take combinations of moves. It won't be able to set up on us, for example, that a Life Shard doesn't kill, for example. So that's going to be really, really important for us to have access to Vacuum Wave to put pressure on that Baxcalibur in this battle. And then Close Combat Knockoff are really, spammable moves. Knockoff really, really important to help deal with that Smogon Galar. To one, remove any item that it has, and two, it's the move I have that'll be able to deal the most damage. And then Thunderbolt, really, really crucial for that Corviknight, which we want to pressure. As a Pokemon that can switch into Moonblast, obviously I expect the Smogon Galar to be the primary switch into this, where it can set up the Snow and get into Titan and Baxcalibur for free. Though I expect there to be situations where the Corviknight wants to switch in and we can drop a Thunderbolt, and that Pokemon will be basically not handled for the rest of the battle, but be put very, very low, or I can come in and revenge kill it at some point. Choice Band Roaring Moon is actually really, really powerful in this battle. I was thinking through like what type of sets I could use. One, I wanted a lot of Spit F on this set because I figured in Mox we were running into situations where this would have to just come in, live an Ice Beam at the end from a Greninja and just kill things. So I'm thinking, what can I do with this set otherwise, besides just like being an endgame kind of like check to Greninja, which is a little goofy. And then Choice Band seemed to make the most sense. It is really tough for my opponent to switch into this set. Their Fairy type is like non-existent basically on this team. Knockoff is obviously very, very spammable as well in this battle. It is really tough to switch into the combination of Dragon plus Fighting spam or Dragon plus Dark spam on my opponent's side. So using Choice Band to just maximize dealing as much damage as possible is honestly, I think, the best use of this set. And one gives me another angle to help put pressure on something like the Smogon Galar. I wish I could be bringing setup sets. I feel like it's funny as I go through this tournament. I'm recording these like in session every couple of weeks or so since I started doing them. I feel like every time I'm doing these, Owen is giving me shit for not running Swords Dance sets. This is just not a matchup where Swords Dance makes sense. I want to get my Stealth Rocks up early as possible. Stealth Rocks, Force the Titan, and Baxcalibur are super, super important to opening up the calcs that I need to kill those Pokemon, or making it so that they can't just come in for free, regularly. So this has to be my rocker this week. It's my only rocker, so we have to use it for that purpose this week. The reason I'm running U-turn here on this set as well is, and I think the one thing, I actually think this set is wrong. I think I had minus speed. Yeah, I think the right team was on speed towards, but the only thing I changed was minus speed on this. Is U-turn is going to be important because I can't lose board position against stuff like Baxcalibur and Titan. I'm trying to get aggressive switching in if I just like randomly click Earthquake or something. So I need U-turn to keep that momentum in my favor and to have Pokemon that pressure those. And then Earthquake is just nice to help put damage on the Smogon Galar, not give it any free turns against my team. Obviously, you know, I'm saying I want a U-turn to not give Bax Caliber into Titan board position, but I also want to keep damage on Smogon Galar. It's a tough kind of tightrope to balance across this time. And the Terra is water, which does give me a Terra type to actually put pressure on both of those Pokemon, so I can stay in and live an Ice move and then U-turn out or Earthquake to deal damage. The Terra I really think I'm going to go for here in this battle is Terra Iron Crown, another Assault Vest set. This is a pretty good way to pressure both the Smogon Galar and the Rotom Heat. Rotom Heat role in this battle is very interesting. It could be just like a defensive boot set. It could very well, and I think most likely, just end up being a screen set. So just having an abundance of 3 attacks. Volt Switch is very free against this team because obviously the only ground type is Great Tusk, which, as we saw earlier in this video, does not want to switch into Iron Crown out of fear of Psyshock. So 3 attacks with the Volt Switch to help with positioning against aggro switches into Pokemon. Potentially like the Smogon Galar, but like I said, I don't think that's going to really come up too much. If they're going in, they're not going to go into Smogon Galar on this Pokemon, especially once the Terra Dark has come off. But overall, I think this is my best way to kind of switch into the Smogon Galar in the mid game, as well as the Rotom Heat, and pressure that Pokemon offensively. We have Tentacruel as a Rapid Spinner this week. This Pokemon struggles, I think, to have really a good role in this matchup. I think its main job is going to be switching into Greninja in the early game, threatening knockoff, Sludge Wave, Surf, and then Flip Turn, obviously, to prevent Pokemon like the Smogon Galar from getting too many free turns. But generally, this is going to be with the AV My Greninja check, and then the classic check to Great Tusk. We brought this set, I feel like, every friggin' week, but part of that is because we play Great Tusk every week. I promise we can do more with this team. There's more that this team can do and wants to do, but with Great Tusk on the build, this is what we're going to have to do, at least for now. So we're here with the battle. The Terra types are Poison from Great Tusk, a Terra type we've seen quite a few times, and then Ice from the Cetitan, which is a classic Terra type for Cetitan, just to boost its offensive prowess. Corviknight left behind is a little surprising. I figured it would have maybe found room to be on this team. I kind of thought Cetitan, that was not going to come. I figured Cetitan, as you'll see in this battle, doesn't do as much as you might hope for, so I figured that Corviknight would come instead. And then the other Pokemon, which Lucario is another Terra captain, has been left at home. So this is a little bit of what we expected, but I think Cetitan, I was expecting to be Corviknight instead, but we should still be fine. We're going to leave with Iron Crown. This is, as I said, one of our Terra captains. Just throw up a Terra Blast Dark just to chip this Pokemon, because if it is defensive, nice to get that damage early. If it is screens here, we want to limit this thing's opportunities to come in and get screens more often. I see the screens, and now I can go safely into my Gliscor, knowing that this is going to be a Reflect turn, and I want to get my Stealth Rocks up. Stealth Rocks are going to be crucial in terms of putting pressure offensively on Pokemon like Cetitan. You'll see why the Stealth Rocks really matter with Cetitan here in a little bit. The Dragon Dance is really obvious here. I kind of thought about this turn for a little bit. I figured, let's get some U-turn chip. I don't think it actually is going to come up that I got that chip literally ever, but I figured it's like, look, the opportunity cost to get it is so low that in case it's like a really bulky Bax Caliber, then I'm fine to, I'm very safe with my Vacuum Wave here. So the second Dragon Dance has come out as I go for the Tachyon Cutter to put the chip in. So this is now in range of Vacuum Wave from Iron Valiant. We just need to get through the light screen turns, and we're basically going to have to sack a few Pokemon here. Tentacruel is a pretty obvious one because Icicle Crash is going to have to come out, and then we can sack it to the Earthquake. And now I decide here to sack Iron Crown. So Tentacruel is pretty easy because it guarantees 2 turns gone in that scenario, and I can use my Roaring Moon plus Iron Valiant to deal with the Greninja in a pinch if need be at the very end. And then at this point I decided to sack Crown. I could have considered sacking Gliscor here, and that might have been the more responsible sack here, actually. Like, I already have my Stealth Rocks up. Gliscor's not really doing a lot against a lot of this team, and Iron Crown can still be very useful against pretty much all of my opponent's Pokemon. So sacking Iron Crown here, I think, was actually a really big mistake. And while I do lose it, really, really unfortunate, I'm still able to go in my Iron Valiant and pick up the kill with the Vacuum Wave. So first kind of problem done, but yeah, I think in hindsight, Gliscor should have been gone there pretty much immediately, and then Iron Crown would have been very useful the rest of this battle to pressure both the Slowking, Rotom Heat, and other Greninja. So now we see the second gimmick come out. I don't want to say gimmick, the second Ice Spam moment. I figure my opponent is trying to set up Cetitan here. I don't know what else you would come in here for, I guess just to attack. But if you click any movement, I just go free into Roaring Moon. I get a choice banded dragon move click here, which is basically a kill against my opponent's team. So I figure it's like they're going to go for the Titan here, get up the snow. I might as well take the knockoff, take the icy rock off. So the snow only lasts for a couple turns. Not that it's going to matter for this sequence. But I can get some of that chip early that I was talking about the team builder that's going to be relevant. Now Titan comes in. This is where the Stealth Rocks is going to really come into play here. My opponent is going to Terra Ice. I Vacuum Wave, do 61%. They are going to get the leftover, the Citrus Berry here, back up to 40. So if I don't have that Stealth Rocks up, this is actually out of range of the next Vacuum Wave here. As my opponent goes for the Ice Spinner and goes for the Ice Shard here, and I go for the Vacuum Wave again. I guess in theory I could have just close combated there. Yeah, I don't know. I should have just close combated there. I was thinking of like potential scenarios where that doesn't work. But yeah, realistically, that should have just been a close combat to kill that Pokemon and not have taken the Ice Shard damage. Yeah, a little bit of a mistake there. Definitely a game I maybe could have played a little bit better thinking back on it, watching this replay now. Grand comes in. I assume it's trying to bait me with Scarf, I think, or the fact that I don't know what it's trying to bait me with there. I decided to stay in a Vacuum Wave because one, it's going to be really tough to get my Iron Valiant in at some point later in the game anyway, and I might as well just guarantee the Vacuum Wave chip. And if it is the Battle Bond, I can go right into Roaring Moon after and just kill it. So not something I'm super concerned with. As Grand comes back out again, I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure this at that point is actually guaranteed to kill. So I'm definitely going to go for it here. I really thought about this play too. So I switch up my Iron Valiant. Obviously, I'm not killing with knockoff here. I was thinking about what I want to go into. The only real option I have is Gliscor because I need full HP Roaring Moon still, and I need Rotom for the Great Tusk. The Terra came out for the Titan, so there's really not much that Pokemon can do to me anymore. Not that the Poison type really does anything to the Rotom, but this is really my only switch in was Gliscor. And imagine if I had Iron Crown there. This turn is so much nicer with Iron Crown. Really difficult for my opponent to make a play. My opponent does get up some late game rocks, as I do just, I think I like to go for the Shadow Ball here. Yeah, I figured I might as well put up offensive pressure. Now that I see this is a rock set, I assume my Iron Valiant will outspeed. And there's really not a good switch in that they have into this. If I just like keep Shadow Balling, there's not much they can do. I do have the Colbert Berry to live any hits, so you see here, this is close to a 2-hit KO. So I can just start spamming Shadow Ball a bunch. I do get a little drop here, which was kind of nice. This does reveal to be Protean as well, and I do live with the Colbert, so the drop does mean that I guarantee the kill on this turn, which was obviously very beneficial for me. But I'm able to go Roaring Moon here to pressure the Slowking coming in. Great Tusk does come in, and I do go Rotom here. If that was Choice Scarf, I do die and lose my Roaring Moon, which is obviously not great for me. I would have killed from that range though, so maybe a little bit of a passive play here. Doesn't really matter too much because I can just go and prevent this from getting the speed boost on the Rapid Spin anyway. Just put the damage and then get the kill with Roaring Moon after. Differential doesn't matter for this stage of the tournament. So if I have an opportunity to play around something, I might as well do it, especially where the costs of me playing around it are very low and don't actually mean anything in this battle. So this is one I did not play well. I think I let myself get really kind of waffled at the start. I think I played around the Excalibur sequence okay. I think they probably could have dragged it in some other time and really put me into trouble there, but I think the Titan one was a little bit of a misstep. And then I guess in the Excalibur sequence, sacking Iron Crown would have been nice to have there in that battle. But that is round number 6, or round number 5 in the book, so we're 4-1 at this point. Halfway through the tournament at 4-1, considering how poor we have been in Draft League with us a little bit. We will take that. Let's talk into the next round. So round 6 of the tournament is a little bit weird. This is the replay that technically counts for the battle. I'm going to put the matchup on screen. This is what the matchup was supposed to be, another Great Tusk matchup, but unfortunately my opponent just queued into the battle with the wrong team, and I claimed the forfeit win. I don't think there's really much to say on something like that in this situation. I could go over the team. The team I brought actually was very weak into what my opponent brought. We played it for fun battle, and I did actually lose that battle. I think a lot of it was, a lot of it still, I think, despite that they had a really good Hoopa set, was on plays that I made. And I think that's something, I feel like I would have won that battle if I just played better. So a little disappointed for that, but I could see, there's a lot you could say about it. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Unfortunately, my opponent has brought the wrong team into the battle, and once they've seen my Terra types and my team of 6 that I brought, there's just no other way that I'm playing the game in a tournament like this, unfortunately. The only thing I'll say here is I know like this is at times can be like a divisive topic about like replaying and stuff like this happening. What I will say is if you're playing in a tournament like this at the highest level, in terms of like what we're playing at, it's the highest level for an individual tour in SV. The rules are there so you don't have to make a tough decision, is what I would say. So I would say let the rules handle it, and the rules are that if you load with the wrong team, then it's a forfeit loss. So it's obviously not the way that I want to win, and I think like deservedly I would have lost this game probably if we played it out, considering how my prep played into their prep. But them's the breaks, I guess. It's if you load them with the wrong team, you load them with the wrong team. So a little bit of a lucky one for me. We've had like a stressful like 3 rounds in a row, which has made it a little bit more of a difficult tournament than I want. But going to round 7, we're at the home stretch here. So like top cut at 5-1 is very much on the cards. Have to finish off very well, but we're playing at this point some of the best players in the community at this point. So it's only going to get more difficult from here. We move into round 7 and we are playing against Scribble in this battle, and his team is, we've seen a lot of great test teams as we've gone throughout this tournament, right? But this was the matchup I was kind of the most concerned with, honestly, coming in. I think my team is a little weak to Tinglu Petch, but I got a little bit of counterplay for that, right? Iron Valiant is pretty decent in that combination, especially once you chip the Petcherant. Hydrapple was my next biggest concern. My team is pretty weak, all things considered, to Terra Hydrapple. It has a lot of ways to come in for free, especially as the bug Terra type, and just gain all its health back. So that's a Pokemon I'm going to really, really struggle with to deal with in this battle. But if we look at the rest of the team, I actually think it's pretty manageable. Greninja here is the fastest Pokemon in the matchup, but Iron Valiant priority is really good against that. It does get checked by Terra Crown and Tentacruel a decent amount. Garchomp, we saw that in battle 1, round 1. It can be checked by Gramble very, very effectively, so that won't be much of a threat here. The other problem, though, with this team is going to be Corviknight, and it's kind of funny to say that, right? Because Corviknight gets kind of hated on for not being very good. But Corviknight really wells my team, and I'm going to have to really catch it with something like Iron Valiant Thunderbolt at some point in this battle to keep its HP low to make it very manageable, because the Gliscor sets that I need to beat Hydrapple get walled by Corviknight. So it's going to be a little bit of a difficult one to navigate here. The combination of Corviknight and Terra Hydrapple actually pretty good into my team, and that's not even considering the fact that Terra Ogerpon is a massive threat. Now, I obviously expect this not to Terra, right? That would not make a lot of sense considering Hydrapple is such a good Terra captain against my team. But I don't switch into Ivy Cudgel well at all realistically, and with the Sword Stance up, it just smokes Gliscor, which would be one of my primary defensive checks. Gramble obviously can do it, but we need that for Garchomp. A lot of things to consider here that's going to make this very difficult. The other thing to note is there is a Ditto. I haven't run a lot of setup in this tour. Honestly, I've done some Iron Crown shenanigans, but if I think if I'm Scribble's side, the chances I run a setup set that you want to Ditto up is pretty low. So I think that one Pokemon we just bring off the table. And then Toxapex versus Mamoswine. I think Mamoswine's probably the better option here. Priority Ice Shard is pretty useful against my team, specifically the Roaring Moon. And Toxapex is good, but I think kind of surplus to requirements a little bit to what my team can do, or what his team can do defensively. So I'm kind of expecting a top 5 plus Mamoswine here in this matchup, with the team really focused around Terra Hydrapple. So let's actually get into the team we're bringing against Scribble. This is the Iron Valiant Expert Belt. It is mixed, but we have no attack EVs here, mainly because the close combat damage doesn't actually need any EVs to run the calcs that we need. We're mainly really focused on the special, right? We want very powerful Vacuum Waves for the Greninja, we want very powerful Thunderbolts for the Corviknight, and then Moonblast generally is just going to be pretty good against this team. Like stuff like, it's good at checking Garchomp. Good way to kind of put pressure on, basically just the Garchomp and the Hydrapple if it doesn't Terra, right? Like that's going to be really relevant if it comes up as well, though I don't really expect that to be something that we see much in this battle. Overall, the goal of this Pokemon is to come in on stuff like the Ogerpon, on stuff like the Corviknight if it's weak, on stuff like the Garchomp, and just put as much offensive pressure as we can. As I said, this is a team that we're going to struggle to break down with the combination of Hydrapple and Corviknight. especially if this is Bug Hydrapple. So using this Pokemon to break and hopefully knock down a piece like the Corviknight early is going to be really, really crucial. Choice Scarf Roaring Moon next on the team sheet. I mean, this is standard, right? I need a Scarfer for the Greninja. If it's Battlemon, that's obviously not going to work, right? But something like Specs Greninja could be very good into my team, especially if something like Tentacruel is chipped, or my opponent gets Tentacruel weakened with a good extrasensory prediction. If I'm in with something like Iron Valiant, they use it to check. I'm in a really tough spot, right? Because extrasensory is a free click. I can go Iron Crown, but that's obviously presents its own risks. Though likely something you'd have to do in that scenario. So Choice Scarf at least checks the Choice Specs Greninja, which is kind of the main problem that I'm kind of worried about in this matchup. If it's Battlemon, it is what it is. We'll have to deal with it once we get there. Otherwise, like, this is good. Voice crack. Otherwise, it's good at checking Garchomp, especially at +1, though we expect Gramble to be able to hold that back for the most part. And overall, yeah, just like a choice answer for the Greninja is kind of the main thing here. Knockoff is like really broken moon in this matchup, mainly because we want to remove stuff like, I guess Boots doesn't even matter because we don't have hazards on this team. That is one of the weaknesses we're seeing on this team, is the lack of hazard diversity on this team is really coming to bite us kind of in the ass here a little bit. We'll see with the Gliscor set why that matters. But knockoff, it's nice to remove leftovers from Corviknight as well, which will be pretty relevant in this battle. But overall, we just need to check to the offensive threats on my opponent's team, first and foremost. This is kind of my game plan for the Hydrapple. The normal Terra type is a little weird. I had Facade on this set before, but once we tested against Steel Terra, the set didn't do anything against Hydrapple. So the idea here is that like this can set up on Hydrapple and force it out offensively. The problem is without Terra Normal Facade, you do really struggle to break Corviknight, but we were struggling to break Hydrapple with Steel Terra as well. And you kind of need the Protect to gain HP back because you're going to have to deal with Fickle Beam a decent amount against Hydrapple. This is a set that I think that I really wish we would have had more. I would have like put a little bit more effort into, because I think we would have found a good way to deal with this against the whole range of options. But I think we kind of worried too much about Terra Steel here when we probably didn't need to. So that Earthquake probably could have been Facade, and that would have made it a little better against Corviknight. But the idea is that this comes in a Hydrapple, sets up, and Hydrapple can't really do much, right? Dual Wing Beat covers the Bug Terra or the No Terra option. Earthquake just kind of smokes the Steel sets. But alas, this does get walled by Corviknight. So this really puts a lot of emphasis on Iron Valiant breaking that Corviknight early, because this is one, a good Hydrapple check and a good win con in the end game. Aselphus, Iron Crown, we have Terra Steel. The Terra Steel doesn't really matter too much. This is a decent check to Hydrapple, and kind of an okay check to Greninja, but we don't really want to use the Terra on this, so it's not really a good option. Essentially what this will do with Tachyon Cutter is like this comes in, takes pretty much no damage from Hydrapple, and Tachyon Cutter, especially with Terra Steel, does a lot of damage against my opponent's team. Really, really hard move to switch into. They can go into Corviknight, but I can use Psychic Noise, Volt Switch to help keep that Pokemon low, specifically Psychic Noise, right? That Pokemon stays very, very low, and then it makes it so Iron Valiant can come in and chip that Pokemon later. But generally, this is kind of additional prep for the Hydrapple, and it can come in on Pokemon like Toxapex and Greninja if need be. Shukaberry Tentacruel. This was, while this is like kind of one of my best ways to answer Greninja, my build really struggles with Mamoswine. If you look at my team and looked at the matchup, my ground immunity is Gliscor, which, yeah, not really good Ice Field crash switch in. And my team is a little susceptible to Ice Shard. We did have Rotom in this slot for a while, but didn't really do much. So we're going with Shukaberry Tentacruel as kind of a way to learn that Mamoswine. Lure it in, get a Surf off. Either, that Pokemon's gone or it's in range for the rest of the game of Vacuum Wave from Iron Valiant. Obviously, this means it's not going to be able to check the Greninja, but I think the hope now at this point with Greninja is to use Iron Crown in some combination, or to check it with the Choice Scarf, Roaring Moon, and Vacuum Wave Iron Valiant kind of combo here. So this also gets me spin, because as I said, I don't have hazards on this team, because my last Pokemon is Air Balloon Gramble. This is the set we basically ran last time we played against Garchomp in round number 1. It does a really, really good job of kind of taking that Pokemon out of the game. But we need Rapid Spin on that Tentacruel. It maybe could have been like a knockoff or something, which could have got me good value elsewhere. But we have to win the hazard war, because we don't have hazards of our own. So the best we can do is tie the Hazard War, which is a little bit unfortunate. As I said, this is, if I'm looking back at the build, we'll do a full outro at the end. That is one of the big weaknesses, I think, with this team, was the lack of diversity in Hazard setup. And a lot of the Pokemon that set up Hazards, either Gliscor, there's a real pressure to wanna run setup a lot with that Pokemon. And Ogerpon really can't come all the time. So I think this is going to be a tough matchup, all things considered, against Scribble. I think my team struggles with Hydrapple, but I think there's a good opportunity. If we play this one well, I think like my team breaks open his team very well. And as soon as the Corviknight is down, Gliscor just goes to town and picks up a bunch of kills. So it's time to battle now. As predicted, the Toxapex and the Dittos stay home. The Terras are Rock and Grass. So Grass is interesting here. It wasn't really one on my radar in this battle. I was mainly thinking that we'd go for a defensive Terra here, because that lines up so well against a lot of things in my team. Grass does mean that like Iron Valiant can check now. U-turn's gonna do a lot from Roaring Moon. Like, there's a lot more ways to get damage dealt to you, but Nasty Plot Leaf Storm is pretty powerful into my team still. That's one thing we didn't really touch on too much in the team builder. Augustana is great into Iron Crown, but definitely something to be scared of. My lead is Iron Crown here, mainly because I figured the only thing that I expect my opponent to lead that leads bad into Iron Crown is Garchomp. And I mean, Garchomp is so free for Granbull that I'm perfectly okay with that happening. And I decided to use my Terra Steel here just to put offensive pressure. And I kind of talked up the normal typing on the Gliscor here. I think this is was maybe a team building mistake, just to have the normal typing and not have the facade, because it kind of made me feel like I really just couldn't leverage my Terra on that Pokemon really effectively. Doing this means that Greninja now can check that setup Gliscor, but I think my game plan here, and where I kind of pivoted to, is let's just offensively deal with the Corviknight and see if we can use our Gliscor as a breaker offensively for the Hydrapple. And there's also the thing to consider, I kind of need to keep my flying type now for that Hydrapple, because it is Terra Grass. The Attack-Young Cutter does a lot of damage in this spot to Garchomp, which is nice. I go to my Granbull, obviously, because that's just kind of the play. My opponent reveals to be Eject Pack here on the Hydrapple. So I think the idea that they're looking for here is this is a nasty plot, Eject Packed out on Leaf Storm, deal a lot of damage, get some HP back, and kind of reposition kind of elsewhere. Ogerpon comes in here, does a lot here. I just stay in. I'm kind of running into a situation now where, as I kind of talked about in the team builder and alluded to, like, I don't have a lot of switch-ins to a lot of things. So I need to set things up to, one, allow Iron Valiant to be effective, and two, to allow Iron Valiant and Roaring Moon to be effective here. Garchomp is chipped, which is nice for both of these Pokemon. It allows me to click Close Combat freely, and it allows Roaring Moon to check guaranteed now. This Pokemon was another one of those problems that exists. This now should be in range of Vacuum Wave from the Iron Valiant, which is super important. And because my opponent just spiking on my team, I got an opportunity to get, to break the sturdy while keeping my balloon, which is pretty nice. So now I can go to Iron Crown here, just eat the Ivy Cudgel, which comes next, and then we can move from there. So pretty high risk turn there for me, all things considered. I just go for the Tachyon Cutter here again. Corviknight is a little bit more obvious of a switch in now that I've revealed to not be like super offensive. But with the Volt Switch, I'm able to keep the HP at a reasonable rate, which is fine. Eat a Body Press here from the Tentacruel and force an opportunity to get a Rapid Spin off. That's going to remove the spike here against the Corviknight. Now they are going to be able to Leech Seed up, and this is kind of, or Roost up. And this is what may be a situation where having Knockoff would have been nice to kind of punish the switch here, or to punish the Roost, but I guess I'd get the leftovers off. I mean, it wouldn't really have kind of worked out anyway. And now I'm in a position where I can get my Gliscor and just go for the SD in the face of the Hydrapple. I know after the Protect, I'm basically scouting for a Leaf Storm at this point. I go Iron Crown here. That was a roll, in theory, to actually kill there, which is a little bit frustrating. And something I maybe should have considered, just dual wing beat attacking straight up. And that spot might have been a little bit better. And I would just sack my Iron Crown here. JK lives on 1 HP, and now a Roaring Moon, or now Hydrapple's in a little bit of a problematic spot. I go over the Volt Switch here. This was a weird play. I kind of predicted them to just go back into Corviknight like they did last time, rather than sack off the Garchomp here. I mean, I still have free switch into Granbull, so which is kind of my thinking there, but You know, it would have been obviously nice to get a little Tachyon Cutter, maybe sack my Iron Crown there, and then I get in my Iron Valiant and get to start putting up some offensive pressure. And now I lose my Air Balloon, which is perfectly fine, not really something to be too concerned about, as Garchomp is kind of low HP and is kind of one of these like weird attacking sets. So a set that we can definitely manage with our team. At this point, unfortunately, Iron Crown has kind of found itself in a position where we can't switch into Ogerpon, so we have to get rid of that Pokemon. And now we can just go right for the close combat. Close combat super free against the team. I guess I said earlier that vacuum waving the Ogerpon was a thing. That doesn't actually matter. It was a sturdy for the close combat. I'm obviously faster. No reason to waffle about that. And now I just go for the vacuum wave. I have no reason to assume their Choice Scarf yet, but I mean, I might as well play around it. It's not hurting me to do so. And now we're in a position where we are really weak to this Corviknight. It is going to be a very big problem here the rest of the battle. Hydrapple is able to come back in on a Super Fang. I will say what this is doing is keeping this Pokemon low, which is really nice. And you see the Leaf Storm here, 88, and that's from non+2. that does an insane amount of damage, it turns out. Broken Pokemon. I go for the Dual Wing Beat to try to get the kill on that Pokemon. Alas, it's not really going to actually do anything in this battle. Now Corviknight's able to come in. I can go back into Gramble. And the reason I like coming into Gramble here is the Super Fang at least keeps pace with the Roost, and it can help keep that Pokemon in range of Thunderbolt from Iron Valiant. I just go for the Play Rough here on the Ivy Cudgel and just sack my Pokemon. Gramble now basically has no use with Garchomp out of the way. Not really much it's going to do productive here. I just go for the knockoff, take my kill. So we're in a little bit of a weird spot now, in that Corviknight and Hydrapple are really high HP. I don't have my Iron Crown, which is a pretty decent tool, at least to pivot around. So I'm in a position where I don't have a lot of great ways to get damage on those Pokemon now. And I'm in a position where I don't really have a lot going for me in terms of chances to break them. Basically, my opportunities to break them are going to have to be on like really strong predicts here. My opponent goes for this kind of play here, trying to basically bait a situation to get some more Regenerator, which makes sense. Their path to win here is through Corviknight and Hydrapple HP being as high as possible. I do outspeed here, does 54, and after the Sugar Berry, I'm not going to really take any damage there, and that's going to give me a position here with the Tentacruel to pick up the Mamoswine, but it reveals to be Custap Berry, so that poison turns out very oh my god, voice crack. Jeez, this is what I get for trying to do all this commentary at once. Very useful, as that Custap Berry would have just smoked me. Now, I would have had checks to it. I could have just gone Iron Valiant. The problem is now this Pokemon is in, and I do not have a lot going on for me that's going to allow me to beat that, especially when it reveals to be Iron Defense. I can go hard Iron Valiant here on the Roost. The problem is you'll see how much this Thunderbolt's doing. It's not a lot. 53 is not bad. If I get the Para here, if I get the Para there, I win, I think. But if that's what you're banking on, the Para, then yeah, you're kind of smoked, right? There's not much you can do. As the Brave Bird obviously kills. I don't think it mattered with my spread. I don't think I could have made a set that would have really had a good chance to win. In theory, I can crit here and get through the Gliscor, or get through that Pokemon and have a chance to win. But unfortunately, that is going to be the end of round 7. So we go to 5 and 2, I think, at this point. So we pick up another loss, which isn't great. I guess in theory I could pair my way through, but I'm not tear it up, so I just died Ice Beam, Protean Ice Beam at the end. So 5 and 2 is not too bad, but that removes any room for error at this point. And I mean, we know the result that I have right here by the end, but this is one of the frustrating losses, and one that I felt like I really feel like I should have had a good opportunity to win that. You know, playing this game, and definitely one, like, if I look back on the builder, definitely one I feel like I could have built a lot better. So a little bit of a momentum kill in this run. 6-1 obviously would have given me a good chance to make top cut, but at this point we are kind of in a really tough spot. I think I just forfeit here because there's really not much playing out the rest of these turns here with my Gliscor, because the pressure has removed all my dual wing beats and I can't attack this thing anymore. So with round 8 now up, the margin of error is pretty low. This is one of our last 2 battles of the tournament, as you know, if you watch kind of all the way through. We are playing against Watashi, or Shake It Up Tsunami, gone by many different Smogon usernames over the course of the last however many years, one of the best players, probably in Pokemon singles of all time, which is at the 5-2 bracket, man, it's really felt like we've had kind of a murderer's row of players here in this tournament, which is good. It's challenging, which I really, I'm happy about that, to have a challenging tournament to really push what I think are skill sets that I need to build back. So let's get into this matchup. Oops, I had OBS come up there a little bit. This is going to be a tough one to win. They have Terra Gliscor and Terra Annihilate, two Pokemon that kind of, Gliscor is one of the most used Terra captains in this tournament because it's just so well as like a two-pronged attack. With Terra, you'll see a lot of Iron Crown, Iron Moth, and now Annihilate is one we see here. This is an interesting team. Terapagos leads off, and Terapagos is a Pokemon I've been really, really high on recently in terms of like Scarlet and Violet. I think, and I'm going to do a video on this later, and I'm saying it here to kind of hold myself to do it. I think people have been underrating Terapagos generally, and I think this is, and I'm not included in kind of like the top 3 conversations of SP Pokemon. I think it definitely is better than some of the Pokemon I have up there. Mainly Meowscarada is the one I don't think belongs there. And that's saying that as someone who uses Meowscarada all the time, but that's another video for another time. Terapagos team here. The one thing that's interesting about this team that's really weird is this team is very focused on a few key win conditions with Terapagos, Annihilate, and Gliscor. Deoxys Speed is pretty good. We had trouble with that a couple of rounds ago. It's pretty good into my team generally. But like in this matchup, this team is very top heavy in the sense that like its ability to win the game is very much going to be focused on Terapagos, set up Gliscor, or Annihilate. And probably some combination of all 3. I don't see Avalok Hisui coming. That's a Pokemon that really wants Terra anyway, so a little bit unfortunate my opponent doesn't have access to that with Terra. And then Skuntank is a Pokemon that really has no value in this game, honestly, at all. Maybe it could come here as like a random check to Ogerpon, but like you have Tinkaton, so that doesn't really help anyway. So this is definitely a top 6 matchup. And like looking about how this is likely to be played, it's very much, I think, the most likely way that I expect my opponent to take approach to this is use Deoxys, Tinkaton, and Rotom as very much facilitators to try to set up as much as possible. Like Terapagos setup is pretty good against my team. My Ghost type is not necessarily great at attacking back. Setup Gliscor is obviously very broken and very good. And then Annihilate, I will say my team kind of struggles to deal with Terra Annihilate. That's obviously a Pokemon we see a lot on Wi-Fi, mainly because we play with D-Ray all the time, and he loves Terra Annihilate, so he always drafts it. It's not really a Pokemon that you see here in kind of SV8mon, and not one that I'm super prepared for, I think. I do have some counterplay to it. Ogerpon is obviously a good Encore user. The problem is they could just be Terra Flying, and then this Pokemon becomes really bad at being an Encore user against Annihilate. So this is going to be a tough one, I think. It's going to be a lot of managing the Rage Fist on Annihilate to make sure that doesn't get out of hand, and then having solid counterplay to the setup options from Gliscor and Terapagos, because I think the other Pokemon on the team we should be able to do a relatively good job of keeping in check. All right, so Iron Valiant leads off the build here. There are a few things that are nice to note about this. This is one Adamant, whatever this nature is, naughty. The speed tiers for this Pokemon are actually pretty good to run an attack boosting nature. Because the closest is 95 at Gliscor, and we're really not staying in and attacking with this set much anyway. I don't expect it to be max speed. And then there's Tinkaton, another Pokemon which I don't expect to be max speed. So I think like the fastest Pokemon is likely to be that Annihilate, if anything. Though we still have a lot of speed to protect against anything random that could come up in this battle. But there's a few things that are really key to note with this set. One, Encore. We need a lot of Encore on this team because, as we kind of alluded to in the matchup discussion, Annihilate, Gliscor, and Terapagos all have a lot of powerful setup opportunity. So we need to make sure that we find ways to prevent them from taking over our team with setup. That is basically our path to victory in this battle. Shadow Sneak, really important because, as I said as well, our team sometimes can struggle to deal with Deoxys Speed depending on the scenario. So having just a way to check that Pokemon, at least after it's taking some hazard damage and some chip, very, very important. And then Moonblast, Close Combat, are stabs. I mean, this is the obvious stuff, right? We're focused on close combat damage because the main thing we want to hit with Moonblast is like non-Terra Annihilate and Gliscor, both of which will take a bunch anyway. So I want to make sure I maximize the damage from close combat as much as possible because that's going to deal a lot of damage to Tinkaton, Rotom Wash, and hopefully the Terapagos as well. Though I expect that if we're getting a close combat on Terapagos, it's with the shell still active. Roaring Moon, okay. Chat, I mean, look, it's Choice Scarf Roaring Moon. I don't know what you want from me. This Pokemon's just really, really good. I need this as a check as well for the Deoxys speed. This is the main reason it's Choice Scarf here, is to check the DOS. Because as I said, I mean, Iron Crown does like a decent job of like holding it back, but like not particularly long term. So having a Choice Scarf option to deal with that is super important. And then Scarf Outrage is pretty good in my opponent's team once the Tinkaton is down. And I expect Tinkaton to have to come in a lot in this battle to manage a lot of things defensively. So I expect that to actually open up, though likely this is going to be U-turn knockoff for the most part in this battle for something like the DOS, and then Outrage if we need to really put a lot of pressure on something like Gliscor or Terapagos. Our Gliscor here is Terra Water. The Water Terra does not matter at all. We're not clicking it in this battle. This is a very much a hazard setting Pokemon above all else. Knockoff is nice. Mainly just, I mean, removing items is always good. Removing stuff like random leftovers from different Pokemon, random light clays that could be on Rotom Wash is a little bit of a spoiler coming up. It gives me a way to pressure DOS trying to get aggressive. I mean, it's kind of a throwaway move on this set. The kind of the bread and butter of this set is Toxic, because Toxic is really important for Terapagos and Annihilate to prevent them from really being set up threats. And we want Spikes up to put pressure on DOS, Annihilate, and Tinkaton. Tinkaton's HP, because we have Ogerpon on this team, and Ogerpon's going to feature so heavily defensively in this matchup, like Tinkaton is going to be able to come in a lot, and we need some way to actually deal damage to it, and Spikes is basically going to be that way in this battle. And then Toxic, as I said, we need some way to check Annihilate effectively, and like if it's Rest, that's obviously annoying, but we have a lot of play patterns with this and Ogerpon to kind of manage that in this battle. The real Terra captain of this team that's actually going to Terra, and I'm pretty sure we're going to Terra this the frame we get it in, is Choice Specs Iron Crown. My opponent does not have good Choice Specs Iron Crown switch-ins. Basically, their only switch-in Tachyon Cutter is Rotom Wash, and if I just make one prediction and get them with the Psychic, that Pokemon's basically cooked. There are a lot of opportunities for this Pokemon to come in. If you remember the speed tiers from the kind of the start of the battle, it outspeeds everything bar the Deoxys speed, and we're a little bit more aggressive with our speed on this because, as I said, I really don't expect stuff like Annihilate, Tinkaton, Gliscor, or even Rotom Wash at max speed. So we get to run Modest here, basically for free. And just spam Choice Specs Tachyon with Terra Steel is going to do so much damage to my opponent's team. I'm pretty sure like Oko's Gliscor sometimes, it does a lot of damage to Annihilate. Obviously it does a lot of damage to Terapagos after breaking the shell. DOS is just going to get nuked. Like, this is a key way for us to put offensive pressure and get damage to my opponent's team. Ogerpon, next up, this is the Annihilate answer. This is the best I could really come up with. I don't have any speed here, which like is maybe risky, but I figured if I'm running this as a defensive set, it's probably calm. It's probably going to be some sort of calm bulk up set if it's going to be set up and have to be dealt with by this. But this is just another Encore user, Synthesis to keep the HP high, Knockoff to remove items, and then Stomping Tantrum is here mainly because I need damage to hit the Tinkaton. Ivy Cudgel would obviously be nice in a Rotom here, but I'm never staying in against Rotom, I don't think, and risking getting Willowed. Like, it could be random Rindo, it could be Choice Scarf. Like, there's just so many ways that could go wrong, and I'd rather just put pressure on Tinkaton and make it so that Pokemon just doesn't get a free turn every time my Ogerpon comes in. The final Pokemon here is Kasib Berry Rotom. We have a little bit of counterplay for Annihilate, and you know, decent counterplay for Gliscor. A lot of our counterplay for Gliscor is to honestly not let it come in and set up. And it can't really set up on almost anything that we've shown so far, except maybe the Roaring Moon. And then this is another example of Pokemon that's really tough to set up on. Annihilate can't really set up on it. And then we have, you know, Will-O-Wisp Hex. Willow Hex is going to be super nice here. The one thing to also like about the Hex here is, one, it puts a lot of offensive pressure on Gliscor, unless it's Terra Normal. And we hope to get a lot of Toxics off with our own Gliscor, which will make Hex even better. Foul Play is then just an awesome move to have because of the setup nature of my opponent's team. The Kasibir will help me live Rage Fist from Annihilate, and then Gliscor. Like, if both those Pokemon try to set up in the face of Rotom, they just get Foul Played and get smoked. And then Pain Split is just a good way to gain HP back as well over the course of this battle. So that's the team. Let's get into round 8. So in the battle, my opponent's Terras are normal Gliscor, as I kind of alluded to in the team builder, and then they have Ghost Annihilate, which I was expecting flying, but Ghost makes me maybe think this is Scarf. It could be. it doesn't change how I'm going to play. It honestly makes my Ogerpon a lot better, which I'm super thankful for. So let's get into the battle. I lead Roaring Moon, they lead Annihilate. I lead Roaring Moon mainly because it's the best way to lead against Deoxys Speed, honestly. Just like get a Choice Scarf U-turn off on that Pokemon right away. They lead Annihilate, which is screaming Choice Scarf to me at the very least, and that dealt a lot of damage. I forget exactly what this calc is, but it might have been Adamant, actually. I don't remember entirely. Maybe I'll remember to put it in editing, but that at least one gives me a little bit of chip early on the Annihilate, which could help, but overall, we're getting into this game early. I go right into Iron Crown here. I expect some sort of Ice or Psycho Boost coverage to come out here. Basically a situation that allows me to get my Iron Crown. I am Choice Specs. That is a dead Deoxys. I don't mind Terraing here, right? The Terra Water, part of why I went with some random Terra here when I kind of envisioned this setup is to one, sell the idea like it could be either or. A little bit, I mean, that's a little gimmicky, right? And like realistically probably shouldn't matter over the course of like a battle. But like there are some of those subconscious things that people think about. And I mean, even once I Terra here, like the only thing they were ever dealing damage to me is with Shadow Ball, unless they predict this in Superpower, which I did calc and I did live after they revealed no Life Orb. So that's a good turn for me. I get rid of Deoxys, which is like one of the biggest threats on this build of all time. And now I go Ogerpon here, basically to try to do something. I don't have good Rotom Wash switch-ins, honestly, and I'm a little bit more willing to go in this Ogerpon now that Annihilate seems to be Choice Scarf. Or it's in a position that if it Terras, it gets checked by my Roaring Moon, which is really, really nice. So I think I'm okay with going Ogerpon. It didn't reveal, Rotom Wash didn't reveal anything, and I can at least scare it out with Ivy Cudgel. So I'm able to get a free knockoff here. They do steal my Rocky Helmet, which kind of sucks. But I'm able to just kind of sit in here and synth back up on the Tinkaton, knock off the Rocky Helmet that they stole, and kind of just waste this Reflect turn. The only problem here is I do get Thunder Waved here by the Tinkaton, which is a little bit annoying. I'm getting some chip. It's at 36%. It's going to be it's at 64. It's going to be at 40 now, so it's almost dead at this point, which is super nice. And I'm able to go right into Iron Crown here. I figure if they're going to Encore me into Stomping Tantrum, what do they want to do with that turn? They either want to get more screens up with Rotom or get Gliscor to start setting up, both of which, at least initially, get covered by my Choice Specs Iron Crown. And my opponent immediately switches out. This is what I mean when I was kind of talking about this set. This thing just gets O-code if it's not like full spit up, pretty sure. I'm pretty sure even then it's a roll. Just dies to Tachyon Cutter from Terra Sealed Modest Choice Specs. So that's just a free kill here. Tinkaton goes down. That was one of the really problematic Pokemon for Ogerpon in this matchup to kind of be forced to manage. And now the Rotom is able to come back in and just try to set up some screens. As I said, I don't have Ivy Cudgel. It turns out it would have been like pretty okay in this battle. But bringing down the Tinkaton, I think, actually matters more over the course of this game, considering that this is now dual screens. So we just knock off to get rid of the Light Clay. Obviously, it's going to have the full set of screens this time, but it won't have the full set of screens next time, which is important. Now Gliscor comes in. We knock off the Toxic Orb, which doesn't matter. And now we got to pray here. All right, we hit our Encore on the Swords Dance. God, these are such scary turns here now. Like this game, because it's normal type, it's pretty obviously SD. And like this whole game is on a knife edge now in terms of like, are we going to hit our Encores? Now we hit this Encore. I'm able to go into Crown. I think my opponent just stayed in an SD'd again, kind of just seeing what I would do. And this now gives me a free time to click a Choice Specs Tachyon Cutter. This was maybe a mistake. I maybe could have clicked Psychic. Now, does it actually matter at all? No, I could have. The problem here though is if they stay in, and then I'm in a little bit of trouble if that happens. So I kind of play around them just like getting aggressive and staying in. And if they go Rotom's not doing anything in this position because the screens are already up. So it doesn't actually matter. Now Gliscor comes in and it's going to try to play the para game again. I do get the Encore off though, which is huge. Game changing here at this point. Really, really saves the game. And now my opponent makes a pretty good play here to protect against my my Iron Crown, because Iron Crown would have been able to pick up another kill in that spot if it came back in, which would have been super, super great for me. And now Ogerpon, unfortunately, I had to be the sack there. There's not really much I could do about it. Without the Rock Helmet, it's much less effective at actually checking this Annihilate. And this gives me free Iron Valley, because if it's Scarf CC, which is not doing a lot, and if it's not, I outspeed in Moonblast. And Moonblast is going to deal a lot of damage to this Rotom and pick up a 2-hit KO because we are Life Orb, which is super nice. So now no more screens get set up for the rest of the battle, which is massive. Terapagos comes back in, and there's a few different things that can happen here. I go Rotom because I kind of think two things are going to happen. One, my opponent's going to set up, which is fine, or they're going to rapid spin, which is, or not maybe rapid spin to get the speed, or just like have Terrastar Storm. All the things they're going to click, being in my Ghost type is going to be super important, as I'm able to just go for the Willow. The reason I go for the Willow here is, one, if they stay in, it breaks the shell. And two, I kind of don't expect them to stay in. They could have Dark Pulse, but like I could just Pain Split that HP back and get them into a position, because they can't Rapid Spin for speed, that Iron Valiant comes in for free. And Iron Valiant has a really good turn coming in for free there. And now they go into, what's it called? They go into Gliscor here. Bait me to go for the Hex here on the Annihilate. That crit is pretty big. And they go for the Rage Fist. So this is 100 Rage Fist, but I am Seed Berry, which is super nice for me. And I'm able to pick up the kill with the Hex. So that was doing what? About like, is that the full kill? Probably not, but I could have also foul played there. This gives me an opportunity to basically save my attack just a little bit. I don't even know if that's what the calc is accurate for that being more damage, but a little bit unfortunate. And now my opponent is going to go into Gliscor, try to get the setup going. I go for the Pain Split, mainly because I just want to keep my HP as high as possible. I go for the Hex here. I don't really need to foul play just yet. It's not that I don't want to reveal the tech. But if I look at this situation, it's like I just go for the Hex once. They go for another SD, trying to get greedy. Maybe kind of playing into the fact that they think I only have Hex here in this spot, or I'm Hex T-Bolt. But at that point, after I Hex, forcing to go for the second Swords Dance, it is game over there. Foul play. Kills the Gliscor. There's nothing Terapagos can do at this point, and that's a big win. That was a win I was very proud of. I think I played that one very well. I think my team could have been a little stronger. I think some of the play patterns were a little dicey, but this Rotom set smoked this battle. This was such a great performance for Rotom in this battle, and against a really good player too. And this is kind of one of those games I watch and I feel like it's like, man, I gotta be winning way more games than I do of Pokemon. This has been definitely a tough year for that, but I think hopefully this tournament and Draft Jam will be a good way to end off the year going into 2026. Now we have our matchup for our final battle of Autumn Seasonal. Kind of spoilers what's going to happen here at this point, considering we are not at the top cut yet. But we're playing against a Coconut, someone who's been in the tour scene for quite a while. You know, I've seen them in Emerald Open all the time playing. So exciting battle here. And dude, I looked at this team, dude. I was talking to Kaz about this. Kaz said this is a Keegan offense team. I'm like, man, I love this team. This team's so much fun. Meowscarada, Terra Keldeo has kind of placed itself as one of the best cores offensively in Scarlet Violet. There's a Volcarona. Oh my god, I love Volcarona. That's one of my favorite Pokemon of all time. Mesprit, Terra, good secondary Terra captain. Swalot, really good kind of budget pickup to have. Duraludon, decent kind of lead rocker. And then Dragonite, Iron Treads. Like, Iron Treads is also kind of one of the classics on these Meowscarada teams as a spinner. There's a lot going on here to like for my opponent. For my side, there's a lot of things I kind of like as well. One, Iron Valiant is great in this matchup. This is one of the better Iron Valiant matchups that I think we've had. It's really difficult for my opponent to switch into. Volcarona is technically a switch in a semi-decent amount of the time, but we can't have coverage to pack for that to smoke that Pokemon. Roaring Moon is okay in this matchup. It's a really good choice scarfer again. I feel like I keep saying that. It's almost like Roaring Moon's one of the best choice scarfers in Scarlet in Violet Draft League. And then there's another decent Iron Crown matchup offensively. Obviously, Volcarona is going to hold back a lot of this a little bit because of the fact that one has Flame Body and two, its typing is pretty good defensively. But overall, it is pretty good in this matchup. The one thing that kind of comes back a little full circle on this video is Iron Treads is a real problematic Pokemon for my team, both defensively and offensively to kind of manage. We had a really aggressive play pattern in round one to beat this Pokemon. And while we're not going to really necessarily do that, it's worth considering here again. The one thing, though, to really be mindful of in this battle is Terra Keldeo is, honestly, as I've said before, and I'll probably continue to say, I think it's pretty clearly the fourth best Terra captain in SV at this point. And I think, honestly, in terms of usage, it should probably start seeing pretty close to the same usage as like the Zarude Raging Bolt and Tornadus Therian, kind of top level. I think especially where it's pairs so well with Meowscarada, it definitely belongs there, but that's just my opinion. That's going to be really tough for me to deal with in this battle, because a really good Terra type here is going to make it hard for something like Iron Valiant or Roaring Moon to check it. I expect Roaring Moon to be able to check it basically all the time anyway, and there is no Fairy type on this build unless it's Terra Fairy Mesprit or Terra Fairy Keldeo to make this, you know, to kind of allow me to outrage if I need to. But then if it's Terra Fairy is so problematic in this matchup. I think a little difficult to bring into Iron Crown, and Tentacruel as well, but this is a weird matchup in that I think my team kind of fits well matchup-wise against it, but there's a lot of ways I can just lose to Pokemon like Volcarona or Keldeo. So let's get into the team we are bringing for this final battle where we kind of know the result. Life Orb Iron Valiant. The reason we're bringing this set, this is a physically biased set. The physical attacks are going to be much more relevant in this battle. Vacuum Wave is going to do great damage either way to Meowscarada, so I don't need to really be fully invested on that side. And then Moonblast, generally into the mons that's going to hit, is going to be fine. In that way, the big kind of thing to look at here are two things. One, close combat, obviously important coverage to check Iron Treads, one of the more annoying Pokemon in this matchup. And then Liquidation is really big because Volcarona has an opportunity to be used as a check here to the Iron Valiant and can be used as a setup opportunity. So the idea is that Moonblast plus Liquidation in combination should basically kill majority of the possible sets that we could see from our opponent. We obviously don't necessarily have to risk it in every scenario, but that is kind of what the goal of this set is, just to break as much as possible and then keep Vacuum Wave back in the end in case Meowscarada is still up. Choice Scarf Iron Moon, Roaring Moon. Oh my god, can't even speak today. You can long day of recording, chat. I mean, I don't know what else is there to say about this point. We've run this set a million different times. This set's really crucial for a few different reasons. One, to check Volcarona at +1, to check Dragonite at +1. It gives me a way to outspeed Meowscarada that's not Choice Scarf. It outspeeds Keldeo. Like this is a Choice Scarf Keldeo. Like this set is so important on so many different axes, and like Choice Scarf Roaring Moon has been one of the keys to this team the entire way through. And you know, maybe there could have been more opportunities for me to use it more offensively, but it's just kind of been the perfect Choice Scarfer on this team every single battle. Maybe we'll get to see it used in sometime in Champions or something different, but unfortunately, with Choice Scarfer here, I mean, it's good at what it does. We have SD Fairy Gliscor here. Very weird set, very Spit F focused. This set can kind of clean up and just win very easily in the end game once a few things are down. Once things are generally chipped, and like stuff like the multi-scale has gone on Dragonite and stuff like that, then this set is in a really good position to get going. The one thing I will say about this set is that setting up on Pokemon, certain Pokemon can be very difficult. One of the things that we considered was Iron Treads maybe being a setup opportunity, even with the Fairy, because it is hard to run Steel coverage potentially in this matchup, depending on what you want between Knockoff Ice Spin or Rapid Spin and something else. That was one thing we considered, but this set is really effective when multi-scale is down and once things are generally chipped. Otherwise, you kind of do have to take too much damage in this matchup. But like between Iron Valiant, Roaring Moon, and the like, the opportunity to chip this for the end game, chip your opponent's team for the end game, is very, 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 very likely, honestly, at this point. Citrus Berry Tentacruel here is an answer to Keldeo. There's a few things that are important on this set, and kind of a few things to why we didn't go with the Assault Vest. Assault Vest calcs weren't generally that amazing, and having access to Toxic, Haze are really important as well, mainly the Toxic. The idea for this team, and the kind of like one of the thought processes, is that Iron Treads is hopefully a Pokemon we can catch early. This Pokemon becomes so much more effective when Iron Treads is down, though it's a little harder to click into this Pokemon than other Pokemon on my team with Iron Treads. But generally, like Toxic and Haze are really good into Keldeo and Volcarona specifically. And then stuff like Iron Treads we have Knockoff for, and then Sludge Wave is just generally good coverage against my opponent's team. There can be random Fairy Terra on Mesprit. Meowscarada, if Tentacruel's at high HP, can Sludge Wave that Pokemon down after a Flower Trick. A lot of things to like here, but the main goal of this set is to kind of hold back Keldeo, Terra Keldeo in the early game with a combination of Toxic and Haze. Rocky Helmet Ogerpon is a really weird set. It's basically my answer to Iron Treads defensively. There's a little bit of a weird speed tier here as well, kind of targeting Modest Volcarona. with access to Rock Tomb, which basically, like, one of the things that this set was having problems with in Mox was that it was Volcarona setup fodder, basically. So we have Rock Tomb for the Modest set just to kind of play around that. Spiky Shield is nice against the Meowscarada, and specifically, if Meowscarada tries to come in and check this, it has to take the Spiky Shield and then has to take the Rocking Helmet after that. So a lot of damage you can get on Meowscarada there, which is important because we do have Vacuum Wave priority in the back. Synthesis, obviously, to keep HP high is very important. And Knockoff is always a good move to have access to remove pesky items that may come up. And then the final Pokemon is Colberberry Rotom, a classic that has been on many of these teams. This is a decent answer to Meowscarada in terms of like the ability to just burn it outright, and that Pokemon becomes less of a threat. This Pokemon does provide utility against Dragonite as well. One thing that this team is a little bit weak to, we don't have Choice Scarf Iron Valiant, which is something we ran the last time we played Dragonite, which basically made Dragonite kind of a non-factor. But hopefully Rotom should be able to hold that Pokemon back. So we are into the battle here. My opponent has brought the Terra Fairy on Mesprit as we expected, but they brought Terra Electric on Keldeo, which means that my Tentacruel is going to be not very good at answering that Pokemon at all. So that's going to make this game a lot more difficult to play around the Keldeo. And if it's a setup Keldeo, this could get dicey really, really quick. Let's get into the battle. My opponent leads with the Mesprit. I just lead Ogerpon. Ogerpon leads so well into the Meowscarada specifically, which is kind of like, on these Meowscarada teams, Meowscarada you'll always find end up leading off on these teams generally. But my opponent leads with the Mesprit, so I'm able to get rid of the item with Knockoff, which is super important here. Colberberry, while not super relevant for Knockoff on the, what's it called, the Roaring Moon, it does get to a position where this might now be forced to Terra, though I do really expect, like, the Keldeo is going to Terra at the first chance it gets to come in, I think, because I'm going to be obviously going Tentacruel, and it's going to use that as an opportunity. So removing the Colberberry is nice, because if this thing gets chipped a little more, I can just raw Knockoff and kill that Pokemon after the fact. So that's going to be super nice. We get the Rocks get up. Rocks kind of an obvious play on that turn one, and why I was so confident to go for that Knockoff to just remove the item. Kind of really expecting that, those Stealth Rocks to come up. U-turn here into the Rotom is going to bring Keldeo on for free. I maybe should have considered going something else, because I go into Tentacruel here, and Terra Blast is super free, and I basically just lose my Tentacruel for nothing at this point. I mean, it was kind of here to check this, but once the Terra got revealed, there's really no purpose for it in this battle. Critical information, though, is Life Orb, which means that this thing is going to be in range of Roaring Moon Earthquake. I think after the third, after this Life Orb, technically there can be sets that live this. So I'm at a position where, I just kind of just try to get the kill. The problem is, this was probably a mistake here that I made. Not committing to getting the kill on this turn. I really wanted to play around the potential fact of Mesprit coming in here. Because the thing is, my team kind of struggles to switch into Mesprit, and the Mesprit into U-turn angle, as you can see there, I just had to throw away my Tentacruel, was super powerful against my team. And I still need Rotom for a lot, so I figured they would switch out. And I figured I kind of have to take my opportunity to kind of keep momentum up and put pressure on this Mesprit with something like Iron Valiant. The problem is, they have Vacuum Wave and they were just content on sacking this. So I have to go Iron Valiant now, which is generally fine, but I've taken a lot of damage on my Roaring Moon that I didn't really necessarily want to think about. And then unfortunately here, the calcs just are not in my favor on this one. They go for the Will-O-Wisp, picks up the burn on my Iron Valiant, and I ran these calcs. I was pretty sure this was guaranteed on my investment, but I guess not, unfortunately. It could have been a very, very low percentage chance to have happened. I think I was counting a lot against like max HP with some additional bulk, but I'm going to get my Iron Valiant burned here, and with a primarily physical Iron Valiant, this is a real problem, because now I have a less threatening close combat into that Iron Treads, which is very problematic. I do at least pick up the Volcarona, which is like one of the biggest deterrents for my Ogerpon from being effective in this battle. This battle just becomes so much more difficult. Because I'm burned, I do just decide to take the opportunity to go for the Moonblast and get some damage on the Mesprit. I could have taken this as an opportunity to go into Roaring Moon, but that thing is at so low HP that I kind of need to preserve. I kind of can't take a risk with that anymore, and I might as well just take my damage where I can and go from there. I go Rotom here, just go for the Shadow Ball. I know I outspeed given kind of the investments and kind of where we're at this point, and I pick it off. This is where I think I make a pretty game-losing mistake. My opponent brings this in to set up. I go for the Pain Split to break the multi-scale, And then I go for the Willow on the second turn here. Obviously, this should have just been Willow into Willow. Lumberry was very obvious the whole time, and I would have been able to kind of figure this one out after, and I get punished for it by missing here. So if I just Willow there, I think I'm in a much better spot. I can Paint Split off any damage it wants to do, Shadow Ball, and break through it. And then I get into a position pretty quickly where Roaring Moon kind of just breaks through the rest of the damage I need to enable my Gliscor. And now I lose my Rotom. There's a +2/+2. Oh my god, there's +2/+2 Dragonite, and it's just a problem. I try to bait my opponent, so I'm baiting my opponent here to go for the extreme speed on the Dragonite, try to get some chip damage here. I go for the Spiky Shield, but my opponent reveals that they're just going to click Earthquake at this point. I go to Gliscor here, just trying to get some extra value. What's it called? Extra value on like the Earthquake, and try to bait some more attacks, but it just didn't end up working out. My opponent does Dragon Claw into the Terra Blast, into the Terra though, and I get the crit, so maybe we're back in this. Like, if we find a way to get back into this, like, it could work out. I sack this Pokemon here, go right into Roaring Moon, and I do have like a relatively decent click. I just click the Earthquake to pick this off, but it doesn't kill. I lose my Roaring Moon, and the Rotom play just cost me, unfortunately. Just not a good play. Should have been Willow into Willow every time. That Pokemon's down. I have full HP Gliscor, full HP Ogerpon. So much going on to win the game here the rest of the way. Obviously, if I hit that Willow, maybe it's a little bit easier, but alas, that is one of those games where it's an unforced error on my part, unfortunately, which is something that's happened a bit too much, honestly, this year. And I think that's kind of been the theme of my year, Draft League wise. It's kind of a lot of unforced errors. But that is it. That is my run for Autumn Seasonal. 6-3. Wasn't too good. Not too great. Definitely a team that I should have top cut with, I think. If I just played and built better, I think I had a really good team to make top cut with, and I played well in a lot of the games that I played in this tournament, I think. So a little bit unfortunate. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you got all the way through this. This was a very, very long video. I know. I don't know how often I'm going to do videos to this length. Definitely for the seasonals, at least, I think it's an interesting thing to try. We'll see what you guys think. Let me know in the comments down below. That's all I have for the for today's video. Next videos throughout the rest of the year will be Draft Jam, and I got a lot of thoughts on Scarlet and Violet. This, I think, was a good kind of final big tour for me in terms of standard SV. I'm going to do a video soon on my full thoughts on the format, so stay tuned for that within the next month. I'm going to start that video after I get back from the Magic the Gathering Regional Championships, which this video is uploaded the day before I head out. So after that, I got a lot to talk about with this format. I think this format was very interesting, very fun, and definitely one I'm going to be revisiting quite a bit over the year. So that's all I have for today's video. Like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and we'll see you all next time.